Thank you. I'd like to call to order this May 23rd meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. I would ask the chair to declare that, ask the executive director to declare that we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. Let me add that in addition, meeting is being held in accordance with the requirements of the Open Meetings Law, Public Officers Law, Article 7. We do have a commissioner participating, Commissioner James, pursuant to POL 103-A, Commission's Rules and Procedures governing remote participation in extraordinary circumstances.
Excellent. All right. Can we go to the approval of the April 10 minutes under tab A, which the minutes of the public section, I believe. Yeah. Is there a motion to approve?
This is the public session of April 10th.
Of April 10th. Is there a second? Commissioner Harrison, Commissioner Carvalho. I'm sorry, Commissioner Cardozo, sorry. I just saw one minor, you're interchanging. I just saw one minor thing on page 6 under tab A. Sort of the second to last sentence in the last section. Page 6 under tab A. It's the second to last sentence in the last section. It starts Director of Ethics, SAN, and it goes, including allowing ethics officers to substitute slides and another in which creating a, and then it starts Chair David. So something. See that? Okay. So asking that be. Okay. Motion. Sure.
On page 9, where it makes reference to the, what did they, it says, I heard complaints. I didn't hear complaints, I raised concerns with my own. Page 9, the second full paragraph. I raised concerns, not I heard about. And the third line, it says, should have been allowed. AFD should have been allowed.
We're on
The second whole paragraph, where it says Commissioner Edwards stated that she heard complaints. And I like to have that changed to, I raised concerns. I didn't hear of any complaints.
And then was there another piece?
I can't figure it out now. I'll pass on.
All right.
Yes. Two minor ones too. On 9, when it talks about important to raise issues in public, including the timing, and just make it clear it's the timing of the annual meeting, which is something that later on Commissioner Eric spoke about, but that's what I had spoke about there on page 9, and then on page.
By annual meeting, you read the timing of the annual public hearing.
Public hearing, yes, please. And then on page 11, where we also have the last sentence of the first paragraph, noting what Ms. Sassauer recommended. I think in addition to noting what was recommended, I made a suggestion that we look into that. And if I am not mistaken, I was told that was going to be looked into in terms of the way we do the closing letters when we talk about the vote. So I wanted to just add that there's a suggestion to look into it and that the commission, the staff will look into it.
Okay, thank you. Motion. So we have a motion on the floor to approve with, and I. Who made the motion technically? Yes, you did.
I think I did.
Yeah, can you accept these as friendly?
I do. I accept all of those changes as friendly amendments.
Right. So all those in favor of accepting this motion with the friendly amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved as amended. Now to approve the April 25th minutes. Motion to approve. Bear, second. Commissioner Cardozo. Any changes, revisions, suggestions? Commissioner Whittingham.
On page 4, where we talked about, it's really the update, the budget update. Just wanted to make a note that I did ask about the difference in expenses for the second quarter, where it started with
Respect this.
the 33,000. That was something that I requested the prior meeting, and then I asked again on that issue. First paragraph.
So we could say with respect to the $33,000 second quarter. I think Commissioner Whittingham. Anyone else? Commissioner Groenewegen.
I have a couple of questions on page 7, and I think it's in the other minutes as well. Occasionally, we develop this habit of referring to comments and suggestions made by commission members without naming them. For example, on page 7, in the first paragraph, it says one commissioner suggested that a blurb be added, and then it goes on to say another commission suggested it. It seems to me if the matter warrants appearing in the minutes and a member took the time to make the point, I think the member should be identified. So there's 2 in that paragraph, and there's 1 in the final paragraph on that page about the definition of victim. So I think if we're going to refer to a commissioner, unless that commissioner's requested anonymity, which I don't know why he or she would, I think it should be noted. So I'd ask that the minutes be amended to reflect who the commissioners were that were making those comments.
Staff will make those amendments.
I was the blurb fan and I am not afraid.
Thank you. And then just 2 questions about the minutes, or follow-up things. One, I wanted to call everyone's attention to the motion that was made at the last meeting that is reflected on page 6. The motion that we made to ensure that everyone on the commission remains informed about the work of the committees and that all materials that are being shared by the various committees be shared simultaneously with the members to keep them fully informed of the progress and the work of each committee. I think it's imperative that if we're going to work through a committee, every member understand what the members of the various committees are doing, and if we so choose to comment or have a thought, to be able to bring that forward in a timely manner, not obligating anyone to do so, but more importantly, not precluding them from having a meaningful, timely voice. And then the second thing I wanted to just follow up on, the Communications Committee, the last line, the description there on page 5, it talked about, as a follow-up to the public hearing, that the committee was categorizing the issues that were raised and referring them to the appropriate committees. Has that been done?
I think Sandy can talk to that. My understanding is that the staff was working on it.
Yes, we were planning a presentation for next steps at the June meeting.
But it doesn't go. I thought the request, or I thought I heard that to the extent we're working through committees, if there was something that in the first instance was raised at the public hearing that should be reviewed in the first instance by the committee, it was going to be flagged for the committee so that they knew, which makes good sense. And so I thought it was just going to be a bulleted list, and I hadn't seen that yet.
Yeah, just as a matter of clarification, staff understood the directive to be for staff to identify the issues and how they should be addressed. Some, perhaps have already been taken care of. Others are already in process as a result of other processes that have happened. And yet others would be going to committee for action.
Okay, I misunderstood that then. My understanding was that the questions that came out of the public hearing were supposed to be going to the appropriate committee, were designated for appropriate committees, and that staff would work with those committees on those particular issues. And from that, you would come up with a compilation of bulleted general questions that we would ultimately report back to the full board.
Yeah,
Now, we did that, but it wasn't something that is happening normally. We had to raise back to get those questions into our committee. I didn't expect it to happen the way, we managed it, but I didn't expect it the way it happened. So I would like clarification on what it is you want.
I can tell you what staff's understanding was. We had done a preliminary analysis, which we presented and discussed with commissioners at the April 10 debriefing meeting. And it was agreed at that meeting that staff would then take results of that. We would do further analysis, and at the June meeting, we will be recommending how issues should be allocated. Some issues to be considered by more than one committee, for example, and so there would be an allocation and a recommendation. Others, as I said, involve things that are either in process or have been addressed.
That you don't believe need to go to committee.
And we don't believe need to go to committee.
Circumventing the committee, and I think it's inappropriate.
So I think that's a separate matter. Let's get through these minutes and then we can.
It's in the minutes. It says that the minutes to me lays out what we're supposed to do, and we've changed that.
So do you want to, what's the recommendation?
My recommendation is we stick to the minutes. The minutes
Well,
says that that it gets delegated
This is
to the committee.
it's an issue where there's a disagreement between staff again and commission. Let's put it under new business and let's have a conversation about it under new business. All right. Minutes. All those in favor of approving the minutes, well, I'm assuming you'll accept them.
All friendly amendments accepted.
All right, approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, ayes have it, and the minutes are carried. So we'll put under new business a discussion of the issues that arose during the annual public hearing and how they get considered by committees or not. All right. Okay, so can we go to an operations update? Let's see.
Before going to the operations report, which is under tab C, did want to introduce two commissioners, Michael Antolini, who's now joined the commission as its Deputy Director of Investigations and Enforcement. Mike is joining us this morning. Mike brings deep experience in investigating public corruption matters for more than a decade. He's been investigating fraud and corruption in New York City government. Since 2018, he has served as a Deputy Inspector General of the New York City Department of Investigation, where he led criminal and administrative investigations of public employees. Prior to his promotion to Deputy Inspector General, Mike was an Assistant Inspector General and Special Investigator who received his JD from Rutgers Law School and earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from St. Thomas Aquinas College. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Short and sweet. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. I'm happy to be here. Excited to get to work and look forward to working with everyone. So thank you.
And I should add, Mike will be working closely with Brian Weinberg to fill out the ranks of the Investigations and Enforcement Unit. We'll talk more about that. I also want to introduce Martha Rivera. She's also here with us in New York. She's joined our staff as a Deputy Assistant in our Manhattan office. She most recently worked at the Inspector General's office, and she's going to be a valuable asset here and throughout the agency in handling a variety of matters, including logistics and the like for committee and commission meetings. So please join me in welcoming Martha. We've already become well steeped in our procedures. Let me now turn to the operations update. Again, it's under tab C, excuse me. As we have been doing throughout the year, we have compared activity in each category, both to the prior year's corresponding period to date, as well as the prior month.
Excuse me, I thought you were going to give us a staff and recruiting update. I thought my understanding was you were going to say where we stand in terms of remaining vacancies, in addition to filling these.
Yes, I will be doing that.
Oh,
I was going to do the operations update first. We can do it because that's the order I have. In any event, I just wanted to say that activities continue to increase overall, notably the number of complaints and referrals we've received, up nearly 50% of the corresponding period in 2022 for the prior commission. And across the board, the figures reflect both essential normal cyclical patterns as well as new patterns that are emerging. With respect to lobbying activity, we're still in the beginning phase of the new biennial cycle, which began in January, as well as the inception of our new online ethics training program for lobbyists that Carol Quinn, our director of lobbying, has overseen, with much input from staff. In addition to ethics training for lobbying clients, which is new under the new statute. And that has generated a good deal of additional activity overall for the group and their help desk. So everybody's quite busy, but they are moving the challenge well. And as Commissioner Cardozo brought up, we are in the process of filling out our expanded staffing plan. But with respect to the statistics, I did want to make one correction. On the first page of the monthly operations report under investigations, number of matters closed should be 35. So again, you can see there that we're making good progress in moving matters.
1 of 7.
Page 1 of 6, first page in the operations.
Is that year to date?
Minus 13.
What?
Is that year to date?
The year to date.
Or
Yeah, that's year to date. Year to date. The monthly count is correct. It's 18.
The 13 should actually be 35.
Yeah, any questions?
I noticed under the ethics statistics that there seems to be, interestingly, a drop off in the total request for guidance as disparity on conflict of interest. Is there any explanation, or is just that the paperwork hadn't hooked up with each other? Page 2.
I'll defer to Michael and Keith on this, but I think this is our normal cyclical pattern of ethics requests.
I mean, that would be my impression as well. I note that there's a significant disparity between last year and this year in the post-employment numbers. And I suspect that there was more movement in and out of state government last year in 2022 than there is now.
Commissioner James?
Yeah, with the numbers of matters pending, maybe this was answered before, but if it was, I don't remember. The 156, does that include all matters that were during the period, or is that the number of matters pending at the close of April 30th?
The 156 for investigations we're tracking, that's the number of matters pending. That's what is currently pending right now. So that does include a lot of former JCOB matters that have not been closed. So that is the current docket. Also, one other.
So it doesn't include the matters that were closed then during that period?
Correct. It does not include the matters that were closed.
Okay, thank you.
Two other small changes that there was just an error, I think, when this was done. So year to date, again on page 1, year to date number of 15-day letters sent should be 2, not 1. And number of investigations open should be 3, not 1.
or comments on the operations report? Questions?
I'll turn to recruiting. We're in the process of posting revised and added job descriptions in a number of categories in the agency. We're actively interviewing at this point for a number of added positions, particularly in the training and education group. We're recruiting for 2 to 3 additional training associates. Those are active trainers. Staff has conducted a number of interviews. A number of individuals are coming back for second interviews. We're also recruiting for ethics counsel. We have 2 added positions as a result of the expanded staffing plan. And we're also recruiting for investigative counsel, additional investigative counsel, and for additional investigators. And I should add that we have extended an offer too, which has been accepted and now approved for a senior investigator who will be sitting in the Albany office. Do we have a date? Start date, June.
June 8th.
June 8th. So we're moving along, and the administrative group is actively recruiting now for an additional admin in the Albany office. We're moving along across the board. And we have another position we're filling now in the audit and review group.
Yes, that gentleman starts on the 1st of June.
The first, so we fill that position. So we're moving along. Any questions about recruiting, staffing general? We're on with Commissioner.
Especially in the education, there seems to be 3 or 4 spots open. We have a target date that we're aiming towards trying to fill those based on our mandate. So, for example, summer is coming up, but are we looking at trying to fill those by September so that we can really get going with what we have to do?
My goal is to fill those positions a month ago. And we've been able to, we're very actively recruiting. I think we're very close to extending at least one offer, and I think we've got at least one other second interview coming up this week for a trainer.
What's been our major challenge?
In recruiting trainers? I think it was only having the authorization for the expanded plan already out there. And titrating the relative number of training assistants against training associates. So the training associates are the individuals who do the actual training. The assistants handle the administrative end of it. And in scheduling trainings, whether they're trained the trainer trainings or active workforce trainings, there's a good deal of work, particularly while we're building the new system. For tracking and monitoring, it's a good deal of work, manual work, unfortunately, that goes into scheduling the individuals for courses, verifying their participation, and then certifying the fact that they've completed the course and getting that into the system. So there's a good deal of effort that goes into that. But I don't know, Marlene, have there been any other any complications in the actual recruiting process?
I would say an issue for us has been qualified candidates. We didn't have as many interested parties with respect to the training associate position as we had hoped for. And we had other parties that we had scheduled for interviews who had at the time decided to take on different positions. So it's been a challenge in terms of recruiting qualified candidates.
Other questions or comments here?
Next item I have on my schedule is the budget update. Tab E. We are just completed the first month of the new fiscal year. The first page, actuals. And on the second page, you'll see the budget projection. We are projecting, based on the staffing plan, based on anticipated expenses, essentially being flat. As I said at a previous meeting, once we fill out the complete staffing plan, we anticipate that our running costs, not for this year, but for subsequent years, are going to be higher than they were this year, just inevitably. So for next fiscal year, 23-24, or 24-25, we will be needing to have an increase just to cover our staffing costs, but we're good for the current year, at least based on projection, and assuming things come in the way we anticipate. They will.
Sure.
Looking at the enacted budget, the NPS, the non-personal service, the cash allowance exceeds the approach. Does that reflect money for technology?
Mariana, do you have?
I've never fully understood why the cash has always been larger on the NPS side. My assumption is because a lot of the cash includes rollover from the previous fiscal year, so it kind of gives us that cushion to cover those costs. But I don't think that it has anything particularly to do with IT.
Other questions or comments here on the budget? All right. Yes.
Now that we're looking towards what you mentioned, 24-25, and we know that we're going to require more for those years. If I am not mistaken, in prior meetings, we had made a suggestion that we're not really going back to the legislature's lobby to give us increase, and that we're doing it in a manner where it's perhaps a percentage. Did we make any changes, or are there any suggestion on how we are going to get that increase that we'll have in 24-25?
We will, in the budget process, propose an increased budget to match our projected costs for the fiscal year. And we will go through the process of proving our case. So we'll initially be working, I'm looking ahead to, typically the budget call comes late September, early October. At that point, we'll be formulating our budget, and we will be working with division of budget to justify why we need more money.
And I think that we do, as you've said, I think it's the way we go about it that was raised in a meeting prior, if I'm not mistaken. It may have been Commissioner Edwards that you said the way we asked for the increase, that we should tie to a percentage yearly.
I think that's long term.
Yeah, I think it was a suggestion that was made at the annual public hearing that our budget be tied to a percentage of something.
Well, we talked about that. We met with the interest groups.
Correct.
And then we came up at a board meeting, at a commission meeting. That was a recommendation I had, that we pursue that. But it would be something we would have to advocate for. Get legislation to change, not for next year's budget.
Yeah. And then I guess we can need to figure out which one of the committees will vet that and come back with recommendations to the full commission.
So maybe that's what we should do.
I
Put that on something that we should
think
do.
we should put it, I think, let it be reflected on the minutes that the recommendation is that it go to the Committee on Administration. If we knew, can we do it by acclamation? Are there any objections to that? All right.
And I should say, as the year progresses and we see how we're doing operationally, as the committees do their work and make proposals, we may well have many additional things or different things that we'll want to incorporate into our budget proposal for next year. But it's good to be thinking ahead, and we should be doing that. Right now, we're just a month into the current budget, so we're feeling our way. And I think we will be experiencing lots of operational changes as we go forward, particularly with the new staffing. And as an example, I was talking about the training group. And historically, the prior agency had a 1-to-1 ratio, trainers to training assistants. That probably doesn't make sense any longer. Probably don't need a 1-to-1. You can't have fewer than one associate people around. Responsibilities, although sometimes that dilutes their effectiveness. So, the original plan had 3 trainers, three assistants. We think it makes more sense, and Marlena and her group looking at this, having 4 to 2, have that additional trainer, which gives us not just the additional ability to do direct training, but also to train more trainers. Agencies, and that's just one example. You may see instances of that throughout the organization as we operate as a larger group.
I also think that this year, as we approach the budget season for the next fiscal year, I don't want to be bound to the existing budget level. I know that we got a significant increase, but that was based on some broad assumption that has not been tested. And so our responsibility is moving from 30,000 people trained in a year to 300,000. We have no idea what the real costs associated with that will be. And so I think we need to take a hard look at this year, take a more realistic look at what it would cost to meet the legislative requirements and be ready to advocate for whatever that increase looks like, as opposed to trying to fit within the budget that's been previously submitted to us. Even though it was generous, it doesn't say anything with regard to how it enables us to meet the mandate we've been asked to meet.
Where are we? Per diems?
Just ahead of that, not much to say about it other than that the budget for the current fiscal year was adopted by the legislature earlier this month. So allocation, which was what we had requested with an additional increment of about $193,000 on top of that, is in force. And that's very good news. I mean, we're going to do our best to spend every penny, but not go over. And I think we're going to be, based on the projection, we should do okay on that. There was, as part of the budget proposal, amendment to our statute with respect to, although it was referred to as staggering of terms, we already had staggering of terms in section 94, but it had to do with allocation of those staggered terms. And in the end, the proposal was adopted. And where there are multiple appointments, the first appointee gets the longer term. As the chair had explained at our last meeting, while that means that some commissioners will have shorter terms than they might have been expecting, it does make them eligible because restriction on 2 full terms to serve more than 8 years.
A max of
10 years, 2 years.
Right.
As we interpret the statute, you're eligible for 2 full appointments.
I'm finding 10 months to be interesting.
I've been fighting it. I got 2 years. I got 4 years. One on the same day.
And I'm not complaining that I can't serve for 10.
Especially which twin was born first. That's a different issue. The communications logo, which is generally
Instead of per diems.
We'll do the per diem.
Yeah, let's just read it out.
Oh, is that you're reading out what everyone?
Yeah. So
Okay. I thought we were going to just post on the website the full amount that commissioners receive.
I think we said we would do, individual amounts.
Oh, I didn't understand it that way. Did anyone see it? a total amount was going to be listed on the, but that was my understanding, that it would be each month what the total amount was paid collectively to the.
Here's what we'll do. Let's ask the staff to take a look at the minutes so that we get clarity, because that was not my understanding. My understanding was that we would report at each monthly meeting the amount that each commissioner received as a per diem, and that would be reflected in the minutes, total per diem, and that would be reflected in the minutes as well as posted on the website. Posted on the website because the minutes are on the website. Let's find.
My recollection is,
As and you as.
No, I recommend that same. We talked about it and we agreed that it would be one number.
I thought we were going for maximum transparency because we had agreed to the fairly liberal per diem policy that we have, that I actually proposed and supported. But I proposed and supported it with the understanding that we would have maximum transparency and that we would list what each of us receives in terms of.
it's going to be just a question of time. If we just post the total, we're going to get a FOIL request. And I don't think we want to be looking like we're trying to hide
I
something.
don't think we have anything to hide here.
Nothing to
What minutes are we going to be looking at?
We'll ask them to find.
That's like February.
February and March.
We'll ask them to find the ones where we adopted the policy in the next. But next meeting, but in the meantime, at a minimum, a total amount. But I do think it's not good form. You do not want to be completely transparent about the money we're receiving from the public.
I do not have
And I just
any
want-
objection to putting it out there, what each commissioner received. I am just stating what my understanding of what our resolution was at the time.
And I made the motion to the chagrin of some of my colleagues that we have this very liberal and generous compensation policy, but I only made it what I thought was the understanding, that we would be very upfront with what each of us is being compensated for our work here, that would be made public every month and be posted.
I did second that motion. That is my recollection.
That it should be at the end of the.
It should be.
Could we resolve this simply by saying if there is an ambiguity in the minutes that we now want it clear that each individual would be published, so there's not going to be a month delay in putting this on?
So I think Commissioner Winningham, who seconded the motion, has affirmed that that was what we did.
Sure. I have the resolution with me. Would it help for me to read this particular paragraph? This would be paragraph number 7, a statement of amounts paid to members of the commission pursuant to this policy shall be reported monthly, made publicly available on the commission's website.
Like a collective to me, but it sounds like a collective. I don't, it's fine. I'm just saying. Say it again. Yeah. Understood it different, but
Your
the
intent is to
wording.
make it particularized by member.
That's was my understanding when I second the motion. I mean, my original approach was that we didn't need to put it on the website, but when that motion was made, I did second it. I did understand it to be just that we would display it.
Second Michael's motion. That wasn't it. Let's just do it
All
now.
right, Michael has made a motion that we report out individual amounts of compensation on a monthly basis. That's the motion. It's been seconded. Yes, Commissioner James. Oh, Commissioner Carney, I'm sorry.
Second.
Right, thank you. Okay. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Will you let us know what we got paid for these last, since July? And these are summary totals.
What we will get paid.
What we will get paid, yes.
At least
In fact, I was threatened with not getting paid because I hadn't return some email or something.
Let me say, so far as staff is aware, payments have not issued, they will be issuing in the next day or two. Commissioners will be receiving payments. This is for the period from the inception of the commission through the end of March. So that's through the end of the fiscal year.
So that's July, so that's 8 months.
It's 8 months. I don't think there are any submissions that we saw prior to September. And the aggregate total of everyone for that period of time is $83,946.11. By commissioner,
Commissioner, okay, go ahead.
by commissioner, sorry, chair, $12,110.98. Vice chair, Austin, $10,097.84. Commissioner Ayers, $4,218.07. Commissioner Caraballo, $6,199.30. Commissioner Cardozo, $9,171.12. Commissioner Carney, $8,851.57. Commissioner Edwards, $15,689.94. Commissioner Groenwagen, $6,295.17. Commissioner James, $7,637.28. Commissioner Whittingham, $3,674.84. And that's in accordance with the schedule that's set forth.
And there are some commissioners, at least two, who want to amend that report. And I just ask you to be in touch with the staff about that, and then we'll report that back out at the next meeting.
And do those numbers include reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses, or is that just the?
No, those are just the per diem allowances that are being paid out.
That, for everyone who submitted their additional hours prep work, that includes everything through March. Because of commission committee meetings and lots that were submitted to me.
And expenses?
The travel expenses are separate.
Okay, thank you.
Right, regrettable point of order, Mariana, I'm not sure if you were here for part of this, but we've collectively agreed it's not appropriate to refer to folks here as judge. No longer holding that title, despite all of the respect and esteem.
I think it's a personal thing. I'm not there yet.
Oh, it's hard for me
I
too.
understand it.
It's hard for me too. I just wanted to raise it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other issues on the per diems, the report out on that?
I just have one question because I had a hard time hearing it. That was through the end of March.
That's correct, and you got the most. I'm just kidding. Yes, through the end of March. Did you hear?
Yes, I did. Yep.
I made a bad joke.
I heard the joke, but the record speaks for itself.
All right.
Doing note taking.
Are we good?
I'll take up with Sandy already, is that mine is purely meeting. Purely for the meetings so far, so she's gonna have.
Commission meetings and
I would say we try to resolve any discrepancies here, do it with staff, and they can be reported. Anything else on this?
And I just,
Yes, ma'am.
one thing, I'm sure people will notice that the amounts vary, and I think the public shouldn't misunderstand why the amounts vary. Some of us have made different decisions about what we choose to be compensated for and not. And I think that was an individual choice. It should not in any way reflect on the decisions made by others to value their time in a different way. And I think that's important to be understood. And the other thing I would like to say, I think on behalf of all of us, is notwithstanding what the numbers are, I think each of us can say the amount of time spent working to fulfill our responsibilities far exceeds anything any of us have billed for. And I think the public, to the extent they think this is extraordinary or something. I think it's documented, and I think it understates the commitment of time we're all making, and I just think that's important to be noted.
Thank you. If they had to compensate for just simply headspace around this statement.
I think we should clarify whether we have to put down going forward the time spent at commission meetings, because we all know what that is, and also time spent at committee meetings, whether that should be included in what we write down or not. Otherwise, there's going to be an inconsistency.
Well, I think staff is including all committee meetings, whether we do or not.
But if, I guess there's a danger
That we would double count.
that we'd be double counting, so we should
And I think
be clear.
Being very careful in reviewing logs, that if there are any meetings noted on there, I take them off the log as I've already included them separately as commission meetings and their hours.
But I think we can make the point that we don't need to include committee meetings on our submissions. I think that's the point.
That's correct. We're capturing
Right.
the time and we're verifying.
Great.
Can we get that information if we wanted to? I'm just curious.
I'm sure I have it all recorded individually.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thanks.
All right.
Any updates?
We had
Communications.
communications.
Well, I sent an email.
I was just going to say that Emily DeSantis, our Director of Communications, Public Information Officer, the Director of Public Affairs has, and her staff have done a superb job.
We
Getting
have
the
a
logo out.
request from one of the commissioners to revisit the consideration of the logo. I would send that back to the communications
Okay,
committee
thank you.
for discussion.
I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention so that was similar. I think you can talk about it in committee. It's up to you.
There's no objection. We'll ask.
No,
I'll ask you just to send an email.
yes.
Because we'll get it started. We'll go down that road. People will be drawing things on the wall and stuff like that.
We don't have our trainings.
I think we should note that Emily prepared the logo. And Communications Committee reviewed it, made a couple of suggestions, and I think at our last meeting, it was a couple of comments were made. And I think, personally, I'm no expert on logos, that it's very good. We could all, propose changes, but I think this in particular reflected the suggestion of adding New York to the logo. So I think it's behind us. Obviously, we can always revisit it.
But that's what Commissioner Carbone was asking.
I'll send it around what people think about it.
Commissioner Whittingham?
I do send that around, and I understand that this falls under the umbrella of the communication committee, but it's something that's branding us as a logo. I really hope that we have a full discussion, if necessary, with the full commission, because myself, not on the communication committee, have a great interest in this. I've expressed it by email, and I would like to have a discussion after the communication committee has taken it up. Happy to do it thereafter, but I really want the full commission to speak about it because this is branding us.
So noted.
Not just communications again. Our committee should not be making decisions on
We're
anything.
going to take it up under new business. The committee procedure, as we agreed.
But as we're talking about approving this now, this has already been approved. So that's.
But the full commission approved this.
We talked about what the changes should be. I'm not, and I wanted to raise that in the minutes because there is not a.
Commission not vote on this?
No, we don't. We didn't.
The committee approved it, signed off on it. We were asked to have input. I remember coming before the full board.
Let's check the minutes.
You said. That's
We all definitely looked at the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, we provided a quick discussion.
It was on the agenda. I don't know if there was a vote, I don't know if there, I didn't have to look at the minutes to see if there was a vote, but there was a discussion on this. That's
right. But
Yeah,
it's
if I could jump in, there was a discussion at the last meeting, and then the result of that was that we took it to email, and we made the updates that were requested. We asked commissioners for feedback, of which I think 4 or 5 commissioners provided feedback, and then we moved forward with the logo that was in favor at that time.
there's no resolution. It says it.
There is none, but let's table it as the chair has asked for new business because I want to address that Emily just said, but I don't want us to go in a different direction. But we did discuss it, and I want to just address that issue.
All right, we will pick up, more generally committee procedures, and new business. Okay. Committee updates. If there are any. Hearing none, Commissioner Cardozo.
Noticed, head of the communications committee, that Emily is working, I assume it's Emily working on the annual report. I just wonder, A, when that's going to be due and whether that will be reviewed by the, submitted to the communications committee for review.
We are targeting, the annual report is in process now. So each of the divisions is working with their section, compiling their data, their assessments of the data. We will share the report with all commissioners, make to be the sensible approach before the report is issued. Somewhat tight deadline. Statute calls for the report to come out. It's impossible to do that statistically because some of the data just is not available because of the lobbying side in particular, and that represents a huge part. Still anybody's thunder, but big numbers coming up. We put it that way. So there's a lot to get done in a very short period of time. Our target is to have it ready before the June meeting. So that we discuss having gone out to June meeting. So very, very hard. We've got a series of internal deadlines. We get in drafts. Ultimately, I need to see these pieces as they go through, and then we will give all commissioners an opportunity to take a look at it before it goes out. But it's a major effort, major undertaking. Yeah, and the current plan is also to include not any analysis, just a summary of the fact of the annual year having taken place, and we'll have references to the various testimony, statements, and comments that we'll receive.
Their framework you're using.
Yeah, we're following the pattern of our predecessor agencies. So if you take a look at the commission website, we've got years and years of annual reports. I think some of them way back in the onboarding and orientation process. I provided links to take a look at, to give you an idea of the commission's activities. But it covers every aspect.
You work with communications on this? Communications.
Yeah, Emily and her group are coordinating the assembly of
The committee. Talking about the committee.
with the committee. No, we're going to share it with the entirety of the commission because it hits every component of operation. So it really affects not just every committee, but every commissioner.
But I think that since it's a communications tool and a major communications tool, it should be not in conjunction with the committee, but the committee certainly should have some input with regard to its framework. And, this year we're looking at our template from our predecessor. I'm not so crazy about that either. I want to probably take a fresh look at what we want to present based on the direction in which this new commission is going. But I don't think it should be absent. the
Yeah,
communications
it's, well,
I don't think it should be absent the communications committee.
not disagreeing at all, but I do want to point out, this is a statutory obligation. Whether
Maybe not statutory obligation. What I'm saying is we should be working with the communications committee to achieve that. And it could be staff driven. I'm not questioning that, but there should be input from the communications committee.
Well, we want input from everyone.
Okay, but it comes from the communications committee, which is, again, we're not asking the communications committee to approve it. You know my view on that. It gets everything that comes out of the committee gets approved by the full board. But you want to say you vetted it with the communications committee.
My intention is to vet it with every commissioner.
When you say that,
because it speaks to
but when you
your
say that, it's
fulfillment.
when you say that, it's also how I feel about the communication. You can't circumvent the committee work, and that's how it feels.
So I think the one way to resolve this, let's just get a sense of the rest of the members. I think Commissioner Cardozo had his hand up first, and then Commissioner Gangway.
I think there's a great deal of substance to what Claudia said. We do want everyone's potential inputs. It's a timing issue, but there would be useful to have a point person or what have you. And I'd be happy on behalf of the communications committee to say that we'd be working, I think, together very well. I'd be happy to convene a meeting as soon as there's a document to look at.
But I think
Yes.
one of the things, because we've agreed that all commission materials that are being evaluated by any committee are be shared with the entire committee. It seems to me that I think an appropriate process, particularly something that is time sensitive like this report, that the minute there's a first draft, it's fine if it is coordinated through a committee, but if we all have access to it, I think it would behoove us all to say, if you want to comment, please do so in writing, using track changes, and be specific in your comments, and copy everyone, so that everyone knows if somebody thought, oh, this needed to be, I kind of thought about something, everybody else knows somebody's already thinking about it, so that Emily and the rest of the staff that have to put together a cohesive document knows what's out there, and we all know what's out there. And if you don't want to comment, so be it. Just let people know you've elected not to comment. But it seems we can accommodate all the concerns that are being expressed here. One, timeliness. If you got something to add, you've added it as early as you could in the process, and people knew you wanted to comment. But if you didn't want to comment, so be it.
I want you to say this. I want to be very clear with what I'm saying. I am not suggesting that working with, I don't want to in any way be viewed as micromanaging. I'm micromanaging the process. I think that if we're talking about just thinking of this global perspective, we want to have input with regard to the framework that we're using, understanding that we have to be consistent with the legislation, and look at what we want in this, and look at the framework that we want as a commission, and not necessarily, I'm not saying we definitely should exclude it, but I don't automatically want to default that we're doing it the way we did it with our predecessor. I think that there should be a fresh look at it from the perspective of this committee moving forward. And I think it should be worked. It should be in conjunction with having a conversation with communications to help propose that framework or buy into that framework. When it comes to the full board, you vet it with the communications committee. We fully support it, and you go off and do what you have to do.
Commissioner Cardozo has agreed that he will be the point person with Emily DeSantis around this annual report. At some point, it will come to all of us for comment, and we should comment. I would think that Commissioner Cardozo and Emily DeSantis can decide how they want to process those comments, and then we'll get a penultimate draft that we will all vote on.
If I can make a point, because it's my legal obligation, frankly, to utter this report and delegate that responsibility to me. Well, it does communicate, it does represent the agency, it's important to see it. Ultimately, it is a legal document issued over my name. Maybe offline we can have a discussion.
But our names are all on it. We're the commission. Our names are all on it.
I'm not disagreeing,
I'm hearing what you're saying. You're saying with all due respect, my name is on the document, so I should have exclusive right and not include us. But I disagree with you. The commission's name is on this document.
Commission's name will be documented. I believe every commissioner should have an opportunity to review the report.
I'm
before
suggesting
that.
that it should be done in
Established,
conjunction
right,
with
and we've established that process and we've agreed to it. We have an approach to this, hearing no objection. Do we want to hear from the education committee?
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
something just unreal. Are we going to talk about the communications plan that was circulated?
Yes,
I thought that was the communications committee, so I thought I'd check in on that before we moved on.
it's the next major item into the committee report.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
yes, it is.
Commissioner Edwards?
the training education. The education committee met yesterday, and we considered a proposed charter for our committee, as well as goals for our committee and our three-year objectives. The overall view of the committee, there was some consensus that we were going in the right direction. But we were asked to go back, work on some specific language that everyone can live with in terms of being a little bit more specific with regard to what we mean with regard to the charter and the goal. And we've asked, staff has agreed to work with us on some of the questions that were raised. And the chair has agreed to work with us with some additional language. We will be prepared to make a oral presentation to the commission at the June meeting. With regard to, we also looked at the questions assigned to us from the March 29th public hearing. And I would like to discuss under new business how we deal with questions that come from the public hearing. That's another issue for us. But we examined some of the questions. The general consensus was that we would like to recommend to the board, and we've asked the staff for input on this, that we want to be able to find ways to respond favorably from the public who make requests with regard to corrections, clarifications, or how we could improve. We want to be in a position to be more open as opposed to finding reasons as opposed to being perceived as finding reasons for not doing it. And the staff committed to that we would go back and take a serious look at the questions and come back with reasons why it cannot be done. We want to assume that we get it done, but if we can't, then we ought to have an explanation as to why not. And so they agreed. We're going to get back to this next month, right? We'll be able to report back on this next month.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we had a very nice progress report from staff with regard to how staff is accomplishing its short-term goals for the agency. And it was quite impressive and information. Members who attended, do you have anything you want to add or correct?
Just want to add that in addition to possibly, if necessary, moving in the direction that we heard at the public hearing, there were some things that staff was already doing. And so we should note that. And what we requested is just that we remind the stakeholders, the agency head, whoever is asking these questions, of the things that we're already doing. Because they must, they may have forgotten, which is why they raised those issues. But included in those issues were things that we can remove from the list because it's something we are already doing as a commission.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Because what came up for us is a lot of things, as it was said, people complained about that we were doing. So our question was, how come the public doesn't understand that? And can we do a better job into communicating what we do, what we already do, and that needs to be. Anything else?
I just, the PowerPoint presentation that you referred to that staff had prepared, is there a plan to share that with the entire commission at some point? It was a good summary of information.
In my view, it's an extraordinary summary of the challenges that the commission is confronted with expanded educational requirement.
Right.
It's impressive in the steps that have been taken, that will be taken to implement that. And it's our view that, yes, ultimately, the entire commission to be approving the plan. And I think it's the plan of Commissioner Edwards as chair to put that in front of the full commission.
That wasn't the question, I think. I think the question, can she have a copy of the materials that were issued by the committee, including the PowerPoint presentation? And I would say yes.
Commissioner Conway,
Well, I have a copy because it was in the materials I got, but, and so I'm assuming everyone got it because they're committed. See?
I would like to, in answer to the question,
But my question
I
was,
think it's it's a presentation, so it's an outline, it's a talking document, and to achieve full value, to realize full value from it, there ought to be a presentation done, and, incorporating the suggestions from committee members.
yes.
And I think that's the way to do it. In terms of circulating the slides, with the caveat may be too strong a word, with the understanding, which I imagine everybody has, that a PowerPoint is just that. It's a talking to documents. It's not a self-educating document.
The bigger issue for me is, and we agree to do it, but we're not doing it as effectively as I think we can. And that is, again, it might go on new business. Each committee, I thought, was going to operate in a way that we,
let's pick this up on the new business, right?
everybody gets a copy of our packet.
Let's just do committee procedure on the new business, see if we can't come to some agreement on how this committee's going to.
That constitutes my.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anything else here? I would just mention the special committee on guidance, since Commissioner Austin is absent for a while, that there will be a report out from that committee we'll have a conversation in executive session, and I suspect we're going to have something to report out. Okay, so communications plan, Commissioner Cardozo and Emily.
Well, you all, attachment E reflects the communications plan that Emily had prepared. She shared it with the communications committee. We had made some suggestions to her, which she incorporated into what we have in front of us at Exhibit E. And we certainly unanimously agreed to approve it. I don't know what Nancy's been saying, whether it's been shared previously with the full committee or full commission or not, but the Communications Committee, we certainly have approved it.
You want to recommend approval by the full?
And I recommend that the plan be approved by the full commission.
There's a second to that. So discussion, comments, yes.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Emily, and thanks to the committee for obviously so much thought and work went into this, which I really appreciate. And I think what's there is fantastic. I have a concern about what seems to me to be missing, but I'm open to being persuaded differently. So to me, this read more like a marketing plan than a two-way communications plan. And what I mean by that is that there was a lot about getting our message out and describing our work and helping people understand what the commission was doing. But there was very little, there was a mention of stakeholder roundtables, which I think is a great idea. And there was a reference in the list of objectives to two-way communications. But other than those two places, I didn't see fleshing out how we want to use our public communications channels to get input from our stakeholders and to engage with our stakeholders. And to me, that's crucial that, social media channels are an opportunity for two-way dialogue, public events are, even press releases and conversations with the reporters are a way for information from the public and from experts to funnel back to us. So that was my overall reaction.
So if I could just jump in on this, and I had prepared a presentation, a PowerPoint that I'd done at the communications committee meeting. If you all want to skip that and just get right to discussion, I'm totally fine with that. But to your point, Commissioner Ayers, yes, two-way communication is absolutely important, right? And so there are elements in this plan. While it might not specifically be a section in the plan, there's definitely elements in this plan that gets to that. The first one is the surveys mentioned on page 8, where we really want to talk to our customers. We want to talk to members of the public to kind of get a benchmark survey to see where we are, see what people know about us, see what they're interested in knowing about us, and then moving forward. And then stakeholder relations. Yes, there's a whole section on stakeholder relations. The first of which I'm recommending is as a follow-up to the public hearing, having a stakeholder roundtable. So I know a lot of commissioners were not comfortable because there was a lack of dialogue in the format of the public hearing. A stakeholder roundtable will allow for that dialogue to occur so that, we'll come up with, and I also want to thank the communications committee for all of their feedback and their work with me on this, because that is reflected in the document. And what we talked about is the communications committee planning the stakeholder roundtable for the fall, where we would come up with some suggested topics, and, for the board to weigh in and consider, the commission, to weigh in and consider, and then invite those who testified and those stakeholders who weren't able to make it, who we haven't yet heard from maybe, to come in and talk about these specific agenda items, and commissioners could ask questions, hear from them, and it'll really be a meaningful dialogue. And that's just the one touch point, right? What I'm recommending is that we have periodic touch points with our stakeholders. So it's not just once or twice a year at the public hearing and then at a roundtable, but that there's periodic meetings, and that can be with staff. It can be with commission members. We just had staff met with reInvent Albany to follow up on some of their suggestions, because they had some good suggestions, technical suggestions, to make edits to the website. So we listened to them and kind of got their perspective from a user on the user end of what improvements could be made. And Marlena has already done a great job in even making some of those improvements. So that was a really good dialogue to hear that. So I envision those things happening periodically, in the future. So this definitely wants to be a two-way communication. And then we also have the plan for the legislative agenda, right? And building up our legislative agenda and outreach. So I envision this process to develop the legislative agenda starting in September with the full board, where you develop priorities. And then we come up with a plan on how we're going to reach out to the legislature and engage with them about what our priorities are, as well as other stakeholders who might have the same kind of end goals in mind. And I see Commissioner Cardoza raising his hand, so I will stop there.
Emily, do you have a presentation?
I do, but if folks have read through it and they just want to get right to discussion, I don't need to take up all the time to go through it. It's very closely follows the.
So, and then Commissioner Whittingham.
I want to point out, referring to page 9, for the stakeholder relations, the communications committee had also agreed that we want to reach out to groups, and sometimes it may just be 3 or 4 groups because we know they're interested in something in particular. And we already had, you may recall, a number of months ago, a meeting with one stakeholder group, and so we highlighted that we want to continue to do that. So I think as we go forward, we can't prescribe exactly who or when we're going to do that, but I think it is something on our agenda. And then with respect to the legislative issues, I think it is critical that we, first of all, we have to decide ourselves what we want to accomplish through the legislature. In my view, open meetings law is number one on that amendment agenda. So I was going to suggest that the Communications Committee come up with a proposal that we first start off, what is it that we want the legislature to amend with respect to open meetings law? Obviously, share it with the whole commission. But I think that open meetings law is stifling the work of our commission. The particular need to have a physical presence for a committee meeting is demonstratively inefficient. I don't want to prejudge everything, but I think we should get started now. The open meetings law group has said they're making a report to the legislature, I think on December 1st or something like that. So I think we have a meeting in June with the open meetings law group, the whole commission does. And so I think it's vital that the Communications Committee add to its agenda, working with Emily, that we want to come up with that. So, but I do think in terms of reaching out to these groups, I think Emily has highlighted, particularly on pages 8 and 9, what should be done, and we will certainly be following up with her.
Mr. Whittingham.
I think it's a great idea if we have the presentation done. I know we're discussing stuff, but at our last meeting when we had the discussion, which we will take up in new business about sending it out, this was sent to us a few days ago. We did not digest it. We've read it. We haven't digested everything, and now we're asked to vote on it. It was more than a month ago, or approximately a month ago, that we made that decision and specifically asked for this, and we got it a few days ago. So I would love to see the presentation and, you read it. Have you digested everything that it's saying we're going to do for the entire year?
Mr. Ayers and then Commissioner Norway.
Thanks. So yeah, no, and Emily, I appreciate what you say, and it helps put this the document in context. I think that on the stakeholder relations page, I was a bit thrown by the outreach to commenters sentence, which says directly reach out to commenters who have misconceptions about COLIG or its processes, so they have a full understanding of COLIG and what it does. That sentence just sounded really heavy-handed to me. Like, I want to reach out to the commenters who have good understandings of what we do and find out what else they think we should be doing. So I think that single sentence, sometimes you run across one thing that bothers you and it colors your reading the rest of the document. So that said, I do think that getting meaningful input from stakeholders is, I think these are all really good ideas, the roundtables, the periodic meetings and the survey. But I also think that in other contexts where I've done some community outreach work, I found it extremely challenging to think strategically about to whom do you outreach? Because if you reach out to one group, you make two other groups mad that they're not the group that you reached out to. And if you hold a public forum, you get a lot of people who aren't sure what meeting they're at. And then you get some people who are telling you the thing they already said in a letter. It's really challenging to have a community engagement session that's both inclusive in the sense that you've tried to reach the voices that aren't already empowered, and useful in the sense that you're getting information you didn't already have. You're hearing not just sort of the usual complaint that you're already working on because you already know about it. And so I guess this isn't necessarily a comment on the plan, just that I think that the roundtables and surveys are a good start, but that I think that we need deeper thinking than I see so far reflected in the plan about how are we going to make decisions about who to reach out to, how are we going to include voices that aren't often included in our process, how are we going to use community members for assessment, for example. I'm aware that nobody likes our filing system online. Is that just because nobody likes any online filing system? Or, and I know that our staff is regularly engaging with that. So it's not just on the input end, but filtering that information back to commissioners. I don't want to be the commissioners like, hey, I demand staff time to talk about a complaint that they've already heard 4 times and in fact has already been fixed. And it's just the one person who, like the internal communications process of how does this stuff work back to us also seems really challenging to me. And so I guess what I'm saying I'm looking for is more structure and strategy on sort of how to make this work not badly when it happens. But maybe that's not something we need in the plan. Maybe that's just the implementation stuff.
Yeah, indeed. And then we'll hear the
But I do,
presentation.
please edit that one sentence about commenters who have misconceptions. I think that sounds awfully
We'll hear from Commissioner Moore.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll do the presentation after that.
Yes.
I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Whittingham said about wanting to see the presentation. Because I know from sitting in on committee meetings that I'm not a member of, but I just happen to be there. The interchange of ideas and the good quality discussion that gets had is beneficial to all of us understanding all the work that was done. And I think the idea that those of us that are part of those discussions just somehow come up to speed by reading the document ignores the thinking that went into the document. And I think we're disadvantaged by not hearing that. So I support hearing the.
And I think that underscores the need to be able to meet as a committee much more easily than we can today because of the open meetings law restrictions on us.
Okay, we want to jump into presentation? I'll go ahead and share my screen.
PowerPoint.
So this will look pretty familiar to the Communications Committee because I did a similar presentation for them about a little over a month ago. And this reflects the feedback that I heard from the Communications Committee members. And again, I thank you for your feedback because it did make it a more informed and stronger plan. So I will just click to the next slide here. Okay, so to talk about the process to develop the plan, I met with 10 members of our senior staff here at COLIG to get their thoughts. First of all, actually, I was very new when I was doing these meetings to find out exactly what they do and get their thoughts about opportunities and some weaknesses in the current communications that the commission was doing. I also saw input from the commission members through the meetings, the committee meetings, the committee day, as well as things that were mentioned during commission meetings, as well as the communications committee input in the meeting we had there and from our executive director. Then I wanted to see what the best practices of of the commission's peer agencies were. So I reviewed other state and federal agencies' websites and social media channels if they existed. And I also reviewed the New York City Conflict of Interest Board's website, publications, and social media. To determine the feasibility of using GovDelivery and Constant Contact for getting communications out more efficiently, Marlena and I met with ITS staff and representatives of Constant Contact, and we also met with OGS staff to develop the logo and common branding for the commission. And finally, I considered my past experiences executing communications plans while at other state agencies and in the private sector. And I do want to note that this communications plan will evolve over time. It's meant to be a fluid document as we evaluate the effectiveness of certain communications and receive feedback from our audience and from all of you. We do intend to update the plan continually. Oops. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the elements of a communications plan. First, there'll be the communications plan goal, overall, what we want to achieve, who our key stakeholders are, what our objectives are that we want to achieve with the communications plan, what our key messages are, the tactics we'll use to get out our key messages and achieve our objectives, and finally, the communications annual calendar. So the goal, which is meant to be broad, is to effectively communicate the Commission's actions, priorities, and policies to demonstrate how the Commission is ensuring compliance with the state's ethics and lobbying laws and regulations with transparency and integrity to help restore public trust in government. And then further broken down, we'll go to key stakeholders first. Sorry about that. So here's our key stakeholders. One of the biggest communities is our regulated community, which includes the state government workforce, and lobbyists and lobbying clients, also state elected officials, as well as candidates for statewide and legislative offices. Other stakeholders include our good government groups, the law schools and college and university programs, the New York State Bar Association, the statewide bar associations, the New York City Bar Association, the local bar associations, the Campaign Legal Center, faith-based organizations who we did use as a medium and ask them to get out word about our public hearing. Other stakeholders include the media, which includes reporters and editorial writers, our employees here at the Commission, and the general public. So that can be, somebody just reading the newspaper, to our public commenters, to people who request information from us. And I believe it was Commissioner Edwards who also brought up a good point that we should emphasize how we're reaching out to people with disabilities and English as a second language individuals, which we do have in some of our materials. I'll mention that a little bit later. So moving on to our objectives, and this is kind of broken down to be achievable, measurable ways how we are going to achieve our goal. So the first thing we want to focus on is proactive communications. So to significantly increase proactive communications on Commission's actions, priorities, and policies and guidance with the regulated community through e-newsletters, social media, and other communications starting by June 1st, 2023, to be fully implemented by the end of 2023. Second is education, to educate the regulated community on the laws and regulations they must abide by through training and proactive communications to begin by June 1st, 2023, and continue on an ongoing basis. 3 is accessible data, to make information and data on the website more accessible and user-friendly for the public by the end of 2023. And this is working with Marlena and her team, which I know she has a variety of things in the pipeline to help with this as well. Media engagement, to engage media regularly about the Commission's actions and data resources based on the Commission's calendar throughout 2023 and continuing on an ongoing basis. Stakeholder engagement, and this is, I think, what Commissioner Ayers was referring to implement a symbiotic stakeholder relationship strategy that is two-way in nature with at least 6 interactions per year by April 2024. Employee engagement, to develop a plan to engage employees about Commission actions by October 1st, 2023 to boost morale and demonstrate they are valued and to break down silos among divisions. And this is something that I'll be working with Mariana on. Number 7, legislative agenda, to develop an annual process to formulate the Commission's legislative agenda that is ready to be implemented by January 1st, 2024. And transparency, to complete Commission tasks with transparency and integrity and in a timely manner starting April 1st, 2023, and to continue on an ongoing basis. So next we'll get to our key messages. And these, again, will evolve over time. And these are kind of our overarching messages for each communication that we get out there, or each topic that we talk about. There will be specific additional key messages, but these are just meant to illustrate our overall key messages at this point. So the first one, since its inception in July 2022, the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying Government has avidly embraced its watchdog role to oversee ethics and lobbying in New York State. The Commission administers, enforces, and interprets New York State's ethics and lobbying laws. The Commission is steadfast in its commitment to restoring the public's trust in state government by leading with integrity and transparency. A new day has dawned in how we approach ethics and lobbying regulations in New York State. The Commission is examining how it can effectively carry out its duties with integrity, trust, and transparency. And finally, the Commission staff are hard at work improving the efficiency, efficacy, and effectiveness of our policies and procedures and the transparency of our operations. The Commission is steadfast in its commitment to restoring the public's trust in state government by leading with integrity and transparency. So next, we'll talk about tactics and how we are going to actually reach our key stakeholders and communicate with them and get our key messages across. So the first thing I will talk about is communications tools. And branding and logo, I think we're all familiar with this as we've been talking about it the past couple of meetings, but we want to ensure we have an integrated branding with a common logo that depicts what the commission does and its values. And then we would use this across all commission communications. The second one is a mission statement. The commission should develop a mission statement that communicates the purpose of the commission and its values. And the communications committee has already started talking about this a little bit to help frame this out. And I've provided some examples of what other agencies have, so we'll be moving forward on that one if the plan is approved. Social media, we want to create social media channels for COLIG on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn initially. And we'll develop campaigns to be featured across all of these channels. And there's 4 different types of campaigns that we'll be doing. Evergreen campaigns, which can kind of go on anytime, any place. These would include like Dear Colleague, having a question, do and don't scenarios, educational posts, and how to report a tip, so folks know how to do that. And there's also things like breaking news posts. So if we do a news release, the commission is having a meeting, we issued guidance, we took action on a settlement or decision or civil penalty, then we would do timely posts on that breaking news. And then reminders. A lot of our communications right now to our audiences and our stakeholders is reminding them about deadlines, the client deadlines coming up for lobbying clients, the lobbyist clients for their bi-monthlies, FDS filings. And then we also want to remind people to get in, like if we have availability for public comment, we really want to get that comment. So using our social media channels as well as some of these other avenues to engage with our stakeholders and say, these regulations are now out for public comment. Please provide us with your comment by such and such date. So letting people know when we're looking for actively seeking comment on things. And then something that I called limited time campaigns. This is be like, for instance, during the holiday season, putting out posts about the gift rule and just reminding folks what's going on about that. I also want to run a campaign introducing the new commission members because a lot of the folks out there don't know all of you. So we've updated all of your bios and doing a post about each of you over several weeks to introduce you to the world, really. And then highlighting different divisions of the agency and staff at the agency. So folks really get a sense for what the commission does on a day-to-day basis. Next, I've included topical one-pagers that would summarize information on the public officers law and the lobbying law with links, with links to more detailed information. And we would start with the topics we get most frequently asked about during our trainings and into our attorney of the day questions. And we would feature these on our website to be the top document listed, which would just be a really quick summary. So if people have a quick question, they can go see that. And then there would be a link to the more detailed information if they wanted to get more detailed information. So we would do social media posts about these and then also provide these to agency ethics officers, human resources departments, and general counsels to share with current and new employees upon hire. So we're not making them go to our website and seek the information out, but providing it to them proactively. We also want to create a quarterly newsletter that would include information from across the agency to be targeted to the regulated communities and stakeholders. And these could include things like Dear Colleague, like if we get a question into our attorney of the day that we think would be useful in sharing those. Again, we would use the profiles of the new commissioners, the overview of the divisions, relevant reminders, and highlighting news releases and data from COLIG, and have a regular feature about a reporter tip box. And then we want to look at the website and see how we can make it more user-friendly. So reorganize it so that links to the most accessed pages are prioritized on the homepage, so that if people are coming in and the most important thing right now is that they want to get their lobbying training. That's like the first thing you see on the website, because that's why most people are coming to our website right now. And, running the analytics to see what our most frequently used pages are so that we can make those changes. And for this, I did look at multiple other agency websites as well as other state websites just to get some ideas onto that. And I will note that we are maintained by the Web New York platform, which does have some limitations. But it also provides minimum accessibility requirements for the information that we put out there. So this is where we have features to assist people with visual impairment so that text readers can read the content. We also use YouTube to host our meeting videos, and that the videos include a feature to create closed captioning as the videos are watched. And in addition, individuals may also request full transcripts of commission meetings from us, and we will provide that. And our website also includes a feature with the ability to translate all of the pages into 13 different languages if somebody wants to do that. Oops, sorry about that. I know we were talking a little bit about our annual report. And, I look forward to working with Commissioner Cardozo on that. But some things I'm envisioning for the annual report are to make it more user-friendly and understandable by including infographics and by the numbers intro to each section. So kind of like what are the headlines from each section rather than having to read through dense text. They can get a glance out of it, what the information is in there on the first page. And then adding graphic elements throughout to include call-out boxes, photos, to add to the chart that is already there to break up the text. And then I'm hoping that we will issue a news release on the report, which again will be highlighted in social media and in the next newsletter, whenever that is. And then we can highlight the report's findings throughout the year to remind folks what is in there. And then I also want to look at doing a second news release 6 months later when the next set of semi-annuals come in from our lobbying clients, because that's a lot of data that is in the annual report, but it would be nice to give that 6 month snapshot rather than waiting another full year. And the communications office wants to be strategic in how we get out announcements. So, a tool I've used in the past and will continue to do when we're here is something called rollout plans, so that we can make sure that we're getting out our significant commission actions, announcements, news releases, and other activities out to all of our key stakeholders, so that there's a plan to do that. And it includes the different vehicles that we'll use to do that. I want to use more news releases and heads up emails to reporters to highlight things that the commission is doing. So we would do news releases on bigger announcements such as appointments, the release of the annual report, high profile settlements, decisions, civil penalties, etc. And then we could use heads up emails on like public comment periods and then routine settlements, decisions, and civil penalties, but kind of start a steady stream of communications with reporters about routine things that the commission's doing that the public should be aware of. And then I also recommend holding news conferences with the chair and executive director for major announcements. And we could do those via WebEx, actually, and then you could include reporters from across the state. So then rather than them coming to one location, they could join from all over the state. And then also op-eds. And we know we had an op-ed from our chair, I believe it was in January, and to continue to do op-eds from the chair or executive director and newspapers across the state to communicate the commission's actions, priorities, and policies. One thing I added in here was videos, and that's consider using tutorial videos on how to use our public search query and how to file an FDS online. So if folks have questions, they could watch the tutorial video. This could be done either by recording a staff training, or we could look into getting quotes from vendors to create tutorials. Next, surveys. Surveys could be used to determine what improvements employees in the regulated community think COLIC should make to its policies and operations. So, if we're thinking about making a change to a specific regulation, we could put out a survey to say, what is working well with this regulation, what improvements would you like to see, and see what the regulated community thinks to help inform policy changes that the commission is considering. And next I have constant contact on here. I want to move to an online platform for our newsletters so that we can easily get out commission communications and be able to do it on a more frequent basis, so that we can let people know about our newsletters, our deadline reminders, our FDS reminders. We can communicate with our agency ethics officers, our general counselors, our HR directors. The one thing that would stay with our Gov delivery platform is the auto-generated filing reminders for people who have not yet filed, who are late on their filings, because those systems talk to each other, and we need that to continue to happen. And when we looked into the kind of the benefits of Constant Contact and the benefits of Gov Delivery, one thing we noticed is that Constant Contact, if we had a communication where we wanted to get out to the entire statewide workforce, we could do that with Constant Contact relatively cheaply, where we cannot do that right now with Gov Delivery. Constant Contact would also offer us a net savings about $6,500 per year by making that switch. So we talked about stakeholder relations a little bit. So I already kind of went over what I was thinking for the stakeholder roundtable, so I won't focus too much onto that. And we heard the feedback about outreach to commentators. And I wasn't meaning that to be a brash thing, Commissioner Ayers. It was just more of like Marlena yesterday was saying, you know, she spoke to the person at the Board of Elections, and he didn't realize that we already had a wealth of information that he was looking for right on our website and alternate PowerPoint. So just things like that, so people are aware of the resources that are already there for them when they just had a misconception. That was all that was meant to be. And then periodic meetings with certain stakeholders. And this can be with staff, it could be with commissioners, but just to talk about specific agency policies and procedures and identify common areas of concern and discuss potential solutions. So really looking at kind of a thought partner in how we approach our work and our end users. And then finally, stakeholder presentations. So this is to accept invitations and seek opportunities to present to stakeholder audiences at annual conferences, scheduled meetings, or other means. And this could include state and local bar association meetings, the New York Association of Counties, and other groups that make sense. I did already talk about our legislative agenda and outreach. I definitely want to create a process for a legislative agenda each year so that we can identify, the staff and commissioners can identify what the priorities are going to be for the following year. So starting this discussion in September so that it could be finalized by the end of December, and we could start the new year off with our agenda already set, and we can do what we need to do to promote it. And at that point is when, once we have our agenda set, is when we would develop the outreach strategy. That could be meeting with the relevant committee chairs, making sure the legislative leadership knows of the commissioner's priorities. If there's other people like the controller's office or stakeholders who might support things that we're trying to do, reaching out to them. And I also think it's important that we let the legislative committee chairs and leadership know what we're doing on a regular basis. So, you know, making sure that they get our newsletter and news releases and other relevant information, and having a single point of contact here at the commission so that if they have questions, they can reach out and we can make sure that they're handled in a timely manner. Next, media relations and other information requests. So for media relations, we've already covered news releases and news conferences. So I'll skip right to training sessions. And we know Marlena and Carol held a really successful training session for reporters earlier this year on how to use the public search query, and that was very helpful for them. So reporters turn over a lot, especially here at the Capitol Bureau. So I would like to do that training session once a year in January to make sure reporters either get a refresher or to train the new reporters coming in who haven't gone through a session previously. With responses to inquiries, our approach, and I think this has always been the approach, but just to reinforce it, is to respond to them in a timely and accurate fashion, correct any inaccuracies in reporting as soon as possible, but also to make sure reporters understand that if we can't comment on something because it's prohibited by law due to confidentiality reasons, that they know that, and that they know that is why we are not commenting. So going a little bit further and explaining why we may not be able to comment on something at that particular time. And then folks on the communications committee asked me to add that, you know, the communications director should respond to inquiries unless the communications director, executive director, or the chair decide a response from the executive director or chair is warranted. And just so you know, as part of our standard process, Sandy approves and reviews all of the responses that we do send out to reporters. Ooh, Sorry about that. I'm getting a little trigger happy. So next is interviews. So the chair and executive director have had a few interviews that I've been aware of in my couple months here, and those have been really well and gone really well in helping to get out and communicate the commission's actions, priorities, and policies. So I'd like to continue that going forward as a vehicle to get out to a lot of viewers at once or listeners at once. And then finally, on media relations, I'd like to start doing editorial board meetings across the state to communicate the commission's actions, priorities, and policies. If we develop relationships with editorial writers, it'll make them more likely to call us when they're writing on issues related to the commission and ask, kind of what our opinions are. And we can go to them with like our legislative agenda, for example, and say, this is what we're advocating for this year, and here's why. So then finally, FOIL and other information requests. So we are in the process of FOIL is new to the commission, which we all know. And I've been working with Michael and Jennifer Bliss and Sandy to come up with a process and protocols to ensure that all information requests are fulfilled in as timely manner as possible and within the requirements outlined in regulation and law. And so we are developing the specific process and how these things are happening, and we are now taking that protocol and moving forward to make sure that we get up to date on all of our FOIL requests and that we're adhering to the requirements of the law. One other note is my office will be helping with the FOIL requests for media. They'll be treated as normal FOIL requests, but given that the audience is the media, we'll be taking the lead on making sure that we're tracking those and getting the responses out in time. And then finally, we have our annual communications calendar. And as noted, all dates are tentative and subject to change. But having this calendar will help feed what we are putting out on social media, as well as what we are putting into newsletters, and what we might want to do news releases or news conferences on or interviews on. So just having the kind of calendar where you're like, okay, these things happen every year. Let's make sure we put a check on that and make sure we're communicating about it. But then, there's also going to be things that come up, not on an annual basis that, I'll develop a press schedule to make sure, and we'll have a social media schedule to make sure that we're staying on top of all of those things. So now I'll be happy to take more questions.
Questions, comments? First of all, thank you, Emily. That is a very impressive, thorough, comprehensive presentation of a communications plan. And thanks to Michael and the Communications Committee for their work with you on developing it. So it is quite impressive. So let's see if there are questions or comments from, yes, Commissioner.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks so much for that. That was really helpful, and I think it's a fantastic roadmap. My question is more forward-looking than it is actually about the plan, but in terms of integrating the thinking about communications into the work of the commission more broadly, I was thinking about the website just for an example where I think the more legal it is, the harder it is to understand, which is not anybody's fault associated with the commission. That's the law. But when something goes up on the website when something's going to end up on the website that's a regulation or an advisory opinion or another document that's sort of clearly going to be generated by legal staff, program staff, professional staff, is communications in the loop on those things to say, hey, this is hard to understand. Maybe it could be easier in this respect, or maybe we could add a blurb to the website to put this in context. Or are you all sort of in the loop on those things?
I actually can't speak to the past because we haven't had an advisory opinion since I've been here. But yes, I think we will be working together moving forward. And this is exactly where I'm talking about breaking things down, right? Like those topical one-pagers, right? So, and the infographics that we'll have with social media. Yeah, so a new advisory opinion came out. What are the 3 things you need to know about this? And then click here to read the full advisory opinion. So we do plan on doing, social media with that. And we actually, I'm very happy to say, will be fully staffed as of June 8th. Taylor Smith joined. She's a whiz at doing infographics and graphics. So when we launch our social media, you'll see a lot of her work there. And then we have the assistant director of communications starting on June 8th. So these are things we will all tackle to kind of take those things that are, yes, very wonky. And I never thought I'd say this, but yeah, I'm reading the law now and asking Sandy, but wait, the law says this. And he's like, no, that's not what the law means, Emily. That's why you're not a lawyer. But like taking those things and kind of understanding, and Sandy helps me understand it, all the time, as well as Keith and others, but so that the public can understand it. Yes, that's definitely what our goal is.
No, I mean, right, all that sounds great, but my question was not taking the document and helping the public understand it with additional material, but taking the document before it's finalized and looking for ways that it could be more understandable to the public without adding a second document on top of. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, we have PDFs of the law on our webpage, which means we can't link out to the cross-referenced statutes. You can't cut and paste it if you're trying to do that. And it's very hard to click back and forth between different sections of the law. Like, that seems like something communications, and I know that lots of agencies do that. That wasn't like our idea, but it's not a good way to make that material accessible to the public. And so rather than adding a one-pager that explains that, I'm wondering if you have an opportunity to get into the guts of how we present it in the first place.
That's part of a project. I think we talked about it at one prior meeting. We have to go back, through our inventory of all the materials that are there, but particularly the advisory opinions, and put them into more accessible, better searchable documents with hyperlinks in them, so you can do all those things. But on a going forward basis, the plan is, I don't want to get ahead of Michael and MOVR, but that part of the plan is to ensure that everything going forward is accessible in that.
No, that's great. And sort of, and I'm not proposing that you should review a draft reg before it goes out if you're not already doing that, because that's a staff resource issue. Or I'm not making any kind of specific proposal. I'm just saying that I think we have a huge challenge in that the legal scheme we administer is so impenetrable. And the more, and if there are non-lawyers in the communications department who can read things from the perspective of a non-lawyer and say, y'all, I just couldn't understand this. That's immensely useful to the extent it's feasible, but I'm not making any proposals here or anything like that.
We're going to bring back the Microsoft paperclip.
Looks like you're trying to say something about the ethics law. Would you like to say it in English?
Send it to me.
Well, and using.
Being the non-lawyer in this group, right, and probably in this room. Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Grumley.
I want to echo what Commissioner says. I think you've done a great job with the comprehensiveness of what you've thought about. I had a couple of questions. When you talk about non-FOIL requests, and I'm looking at page 13 of the materials, what do you mean by a non-FOIL request? I just didn't know. I usually think of requests.
Yeah, so we'll get questions like, for instance, from an agency, like if someone requests, we had a training today, someone asked if when I fill out my FDS and somebody foils for that, will I be notified, right? So it's just a general question that is coming from, a trainer. That's not a FOIL request, right? It's just a question. So those types of requests. So going live, for instance, with social media, we will get those questions on our social media accounts, right? So the communications office will handle those. And then if we get one in now, like that specific one was best answered by our FDS bureau. So, I took a look at it, worked with Michael and Melinda, and someone got back to them. But, just making sure like it's not required to get a, 5-day letter. They're not requesting information, like data. It's just general inquiries coming into the department.
And then when you see a pattern of general inquiries, that's where you were thinking about then doing some topical fact sheets that if you've got this question 5 times in one day, put out a fact sheet that
Yeah, and
answers.
that's where I'm gonna be working with our lawyers of the day to kind of get there. I know Michael, I forget which one he told me, he goes, we get this question all the time. I said, okay, that'll be our first fact sheet, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But yeah, the ones that we're getting the most common questions on, that'll kind of be our order to get those done.
One other thought, when I worked for the State School Boards Association, which had this huge education component of educating all the lay school board members across the state. One of the publications they created, which was so useful to everyone, it was called School Law. And do you know school law? Probably.
I know school law, 'cause we used to, at the education department, we would often refer reporters to it, read this explanation, yes.
Everybody who ever had to come into contact with school used school law because of the way it was written. And it was topical in a Q&A format. And it was great. And it was a way to do two things. To Commissioner Ayers' point, it was a way to take a legal answer, but phrase it in a way that was more plain English, more relevant to the person who asked the question, And while it's a big undertaking, once it starts, it builds on itself. I mean, like, once you've got the body to start with, every time you've got a new question, you just add it. The challenge becomes making sure you keep it current. But that book was published, and so there was a task that is sold it out, and people reviewed the answers to make sure they were still accurate. But in terms of a useful resource, I mean, just like what you said, anybody who deals with school districts and how they work and how a curriculum gets set. And I would think for something like the ethics law, where there are a lot of regularly asked questions, and you don't have to worry, I don't think, so much about being mindful of every nuance, other than to state that if it is so nuanced, you just say, here's the general answer, but if you want greater specificity, here's where you go for that answer, either in hyperlinks or a phone call. And I think if you really want anybody who's interested from every one of our stakeholders, I think would find that kind of a resource valuable. Just a thought.
Yeah, certainly.
I'd be happy to help.
I think, yeah, it's gonna be a resource issue, first of all, given everything else that we're trying to implement with the communications plan. But one thing I think about that might be an opportunity for that is I know right now we have which Sandy introduced me to the other day, a publication that's a very comprehensive guidance document on our website that once I think this commission kind of reviews everything and makes the changes, we'll be probably updating that document. And that might be an opportunity to make that document more user-friendly, have some Q&A at the end of each section, maybe. That is like, oh, here's the most common questions we get on this. Let's put them here at the end of the document, at the end of each section. So that's certainly something I think we can look to for the future.
Yeah, that's the 2019 Ethics and Lobbying Law, the New York Handbook. That's on our website.
Which is great.
It's a terrific resource.
It's great.
But those are great suggestions for augmenting it and tuning it to different audiences, different applications.
Mr. Whittingham?
Yeah, just a few comments. I know that at the beginning, I was just wondering if there were feedback from other members outside of the communication committee. That's one question I had. In terms of the goals, I realized that at our last meeting, we had some discussion and we did make mention about the, independence being missing from what we have there. I realized that we still set out the goal and we still exclude that from one of the goals that we have. Just want to know if there is a reason for that as well. When we talk about the stakeholders, and I know the general public is included there, which they are a part of it, but how are we going to become a lot more visible to them in terms of, are we thinking about the NPR? the Spectrum local news to really get out there and be visible. Op-eds are great, but again, who's reading them or who might be? We're trying to gain the trust of the general public, which is all New Yorkers. Yes, we have oversight over the state employees, but more than that, it is the entire state that we are working on behalf of. And I really want us to get to what we might call the little man, or the man that's not reading the op-ed necessarily, but might watch Spectrum News, might listen to the NPR. We want to get to them. There's a question that I think we have not addressed, and I don't know if it's intended to be addressed by stating the committee, the communication director or the executive director and chair as who is responding to questions. So, for example, one of the non-FOIL requests for the general public have inquiries or requests. If someone speaks to another commissioner and they have a request and that commissioner respond to them, what is our policy on that? What are we going to say? If someone reached out on LinkedIn and say, Commissioner, or that, can you do X, Y, Z? We want that. Can you respond to them? I think we haven't made it clear. And since we're looking towards adopting something, this is something I believe we should clarify. And, I understand the chair and the executive director is going to speak a lot on behalf of the commissioner, but is that exclusive? Are they the only ones? And are those the only interviews, or stuff that can take place?
Let me speak to the last one, and then let's lead us to address the others in this one too. The answer is no, as to whether or not Sandy and I are the only ones who can speak on behalf of or Emily. Absolutely not. And one of the things that I've mentioned is that we should find opportunities for the rest of the commissioners to presentations, speak in various areas. But I do think it's important that if we get any inquiry from any source through any media, we should immediately contact Emily before we respond, even if we think it's an easy response. I just think it's potentially fraught for commissioners to start to engage without talking to the communications director.
And on page 11 of the report, it says the communications director should respond to inquiries unless the communications director, executive director, or the chair decide a response from the executive director or chair is warranted. And presumably, if someone says, I want to speak to Caitlin about something, there'll be a judgment made as to whether, given the nature of the inquiry, that's appropriate. It would be terrible if one commissioner is answering a question one way, assuming everyone's in good faith, and someone else is answering exactly the opposite way. We want to be sure that I think it's in the commission's interest to be presenting things in a coherent way. But obviously, there will be questions that are appropriate for an individual commissioner to answer. I think when that happens, Fred or Sandy or Emily would be making that judgment.
So they make the determination as to whether or not you can speak.
Well,
I agree.
It's a practical matter.
Yeah, no commissioner has to follow it. I mean, you're free to speak as you go. I just think you have a procedure, but if you choose not to follow it, I mean, or we could not adopt the procedure, and then we could just speak. I would amend this, though, to say chair, executive director, or other commissioners or staff as directed.
Sure.
Just on that, I think I had raised a similar question at an earlier meeting, and I believe Commissioner Cardozo indicated that the Communications Committee would look at that issue specifically, and I do think it's something that comes up all the time in terms of, because there's a difference between reporters and regulated persons and members of the public, and I believe the advice was Well, until the communications committee comes up with a proposal for us to discuss, just try to keep folks in the loop, which seems like a good practice. But I strongly agree it's something that we should have a collective policy and discussion about. Again, understanding that people are free to not follow the policy, but
I encourage all of us to be particularly careful about responding over any form of social media to any question without vetting it. Casual conversations are one thing, somebody calling you on the phone, but anything that comes across the virtual transom, I would just say, conversation was. Emily, you want to respond to
Sure.
Commissioner?
Sure. Sure. So the input from additional commissioners, if you recall back on committee day, there was a communications committee and there was a lot of discussion about kind of the direction that the commission wanted to take. So I did take consideration from that. And then I followed the process that was kind of given to me, which was, come up with the plan, bring it to the committee. And bring it to the executive director and the chair, and then bring it to the full board. So here we are now, or the full commission. So here we are now bringing it to the full commission. With your comment on independent, I am certainly open to adding that. I just would want to consult with Sandy on that and the chair on that, before doing so, but certainly open to adding that word to our goal. And in terms of expanding our reach, definitely expanding our reach. Sandy has already done an interview with Spectrum News with Susan Arbetter. We have done now 2 interviews with David Lombardo, who's aired, he is NPR. He's aired across all the stations across the state, the NPR stations across the state. We also have a request right now from, which is the Public Access TV New York Now, to have Sandy come in and do an interview, and we're looking to schedule that date. And I just want to note that since Taylor came on, we have expanded our media list by, I guess, 400%. We went from 200 media contacts on our media list to now we have more than 800. That includes ethnic media. It includes like the local community newspapers across the state. And one of the first things I did when I got here was get the kind of media list to see who was on it. I saw some things were outdated. I made sure the Legislative Correspondence Association folks, those are the people who sit at the state capitol, all of their information was up to date. And then I looked to get these other important entities added to the list. So now we've gone from approximately 200 media contacts to approximately 800 on our list.
I think if we can add that here, that would be good to showcase that we are contacting the ethnic groups, the local groups, those in the city that's really not seeing it. As it relates to the gold, I appreciate your comment. I think, yes, speak to the executive director and the chair, but collectively as the commission, it was raised before and we're going through procedures, and the commission should probably look at that as a whole versus let's see what the chair and the executive directors have on the issue that is seemed to be very important to the commission as a whole.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Michael, and the Communications Committee for the good work you've done. Extraordinary work. All right, we are now at.
Just one thing, are we voting on this?
Is there any? Want to make a motion?
I move that we adopt the communications.
For a second. And Commissioner Edwards, discussion.
I just have a question. You had said you wanted it amended to
Yes.
reflect that commissioners could be.
Correct, on
I have
page 11.
noted, yep, I have noted what Commissioner Whittingham, what the chair said, and others have said as edits to make throughout. So I will make those edits.
Approve as amended, yes.
I just wanted to be clear because as to that amendment,
Right.
when we vote, I want to vote separately on that amendment. Okay.
Well, let's take that amendment.
Okay.
So we have a request to vote on one of the amendments that has been recommended, and that is on page 11, the very last paragraph that says communications director shall respond to inquiries unless communications director, executive director, or chair decide a response from the executive director or chair is warranted. I would put executive director, chair, other commissioner, other staff.
Or other staff member, that was the last part.
And then decide a
It may be
response from the
that he
executive.
should respond or Michael should respond.
Right, yep, yep.
Respond from the second part.
Yes. So on the second part, it would now read, the communications director should respond to inquiries unless the communications director, executive director, or the chair decide a response from the executive director or the chair or another commissioner or other staff or another staff member is warranted. It's
The
adding,
commissioner speaking still has to be approved before.
yes,
So long as there's,
you're okay with
yes, I just wanted to be clear as to the control.
got it.
We're requesting that other commissioners, before they speak, feel that, but it's not a mandate.
It is-
That is a,
We
that
can
is
never, we
clarified.
can never mandate.
Can't mandate.
We
Okay,
could never
that's just what I want to be clear on.
Sure.
Why do we say we can never mandate it?
There's an independent commission.
Commissioner, yeah.
Yes. I understand, but we can decide as a body that we don't think it's a good practice.
We've already stated that. We've been on record.
So our expectation is that we don't do it, but if you do it, it's not a violation of your.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the plan as amended, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Could I just say one more thing?
Sure.
I think as this discussion highlights, reflecting the fact that Emily's been only with us for, what, 3 months?
Two and a half.
And it doesn't yet have a fully staffed. I just want to express my appreciation. I think it's on behalf of everyone for the incredible work you've done already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see if we can plow through these others. We'll take a break, get some lunch, and do the executive session. On freedom of information law regulations, this is just an extension of the emergency adoption of the regulation. Is there any need for any extension?
Only if there are questions, we included the summary essentially from the SAPA submission. On it, we need the extension because regulations won't be right for permanent adoption prior to the June meeting. Or
Is that clear?
June meeting.
Are we clear on that?
Sort of. I'm grateful to the staff for providing the SAPA submissions. It didn't actually address the what I had expressed at the last meeting, which was that I didn't know how to tell whether what was in the packet was the same text as what's in the SAPA submissions. Or like attachment F starts with an unidentified block of text that says the proposed rulemaking satisfies the commission's statutory obligation. My request would be, number one, that every document that comes to the commission should have a title, an author, and a date. That we shouldn't get anything that's just a block of text without preferably a to from and a date and a title, but that also, so I was looking at this as I was reviewing the packet, trying to figure out, okay, so is this block of text addressed to us, the commissioners, or is this what's going to go into the new SAPA submission when we?
No, it's just because
they register?
My apologies, because we did the two-sided copying. It's actually a freestanding, the request, there was a request at the prior meeting that we include a summary, rather than just the text, but also include a summary as well as a little bit of the history of the provision to refresh commissioners' recollection.
So that's what this page is?
That's what that page is. It's not part of the submission. It
Okay.
just happened to be because of the two-sided copying. It could have been a freestanding document.
so then.
My apologies.
No, that's okay. But, so then when it says the proposed rulemaking satisfied, does that mean the thing that we're now being asked to approve, that would satisfy the commission's
No,
obligation?
no, that was just a summary. The proposed regulation is on the page that follows. It begins on the page that follows.
Right.
And we also included the notice published in the state register. Because that was at the back, so we thought that would be helpful.
But that notice didn't go along with what we're being asked to vote on. It went along with what we voted on last time.
It's to extend the emergency adoption of the proposed regulation during the rulemaking proceeding because the current adoption emergency will expire on June 25th. The next meeting's not until June 27th.
Okay, so I guess what I'm looking for is something that.
We'll put separator tabs in next time.
No, that wouldn't, I mean, that would help, I guess, but it's the way the blurb is written, it would be really nice to have something like, from the staff. We are asking you to vote on the attached. The attached is the exact same thing you voted on at the last meeting, which is itself merely sort of satisfying, it's just an extent, but like something so that if you were going to tell us now what we're being asked to vote on, I just find these two paragraphs, I wasn't able to get from there to figuring out what the attached documents were. That's all.
Yeah, the point was to have a little, head notes. This is why you've got this in your packet and what we're expecting you to do. And to Commissioner Ayers' point, this just made you figure out first what it was.
We'll put a little header on it next time, separate page, so you'll see that it's the descriptor of the proposed regulation, and we'll indicate if we do in the future, I thought it would be helpful, but maybe it's confusing, include a copy of the notice published in the state register. Which lays that out. Maybe it was too much information.
No, it wasn't too much information. I just didn't know what it was doing there because that was clearly something that had already happened. But it's in the.
And it could be in the same tab, because that's what we're talking about.
But when it says things like current part 937 is repealed and replaced, I don't know if is means at the time whoever wrote this wrote it, or at the time I vote on it, or at the time the staff does something later.
I think the time it's actually becomes a permanent reg, I think.
It's the explanation from the SAPA submission. We extracted and just stuck here as a summary of what the effect of it is. And required when you commence a rulemaking to.
The main sentence that's important on that first page is that last sentence in the second paragraph that this regulation became effective on an emergency basis on March 28th, published as a notice of emergency adoption, and then on this date, and then public comment period ends on this date.
No, that's really, I think by the time I got there, I no longer knew what this regulation referred to.
Sure, no. And I think just having that, okay, this came before you on this meeting, you voted on it, there were no other public comments, something that just.
Yeah, what you just said, that's it, that's perfect.
And so basically what you're seeing here is what you already voted on, we're just extending the age of emergency.
Exactly.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
In one sense, were there any public comments?
I
Could you say,
No.
I don't believe so, no.
But public comment period ends.
no, but
We haven't received any yet. No.
okay, that would be interesting.
It doesn't mean we
But it would
won't.
end-
It doesn't mean we won't get a request for an extension of time to comment. But we haven't so.
We're approving this on just extending the emergency.
Yeah, it's a motion to extend the emergency adoption of the regulatory amendments to 1937. Commission's regulations which repeal and replace prior part 37. Part 937.
We have a motion to extend the emergency adoption. Sure.
In 937.2, I'm just curious, if the information that's set forth in the annual statements is on the website, but not the financial statement itself redacted, is what I'm, yeah. Is it the actual statement or just the information? Subdivision 1, the information set forth in the annual statements
The statute calls it, yeah, I mean, that's what the statute calls it. The
Information.
information, if you're filing it electronically, it's put into a format.
Okay, so it's not the actual statement redacted, it's just information about, like blocks.
You filed electronically. I don't know, if it's filed on paper, do we put the PDF? Is that a Linda question? The FDS.
I'm not, right, I'm asking, is it the information set forth in the annual statement, or is it the annual statement, I guess, is my question. The information set forth in annual statements of financial disclosure.
We provide the information. It's printed out. It's put into.
So it's not the annual statement. I just want to be clear what we're.
Yeah, I mean, we actually discussed this.
Yeah, we'd have to check, but I believe if somebody files the paper form, then the PDF of it goes up.
Yeah,
If it's
the
online.
paper form, but most
people
filers,
file.
not all filers, file electronically.
So only the
And
information.
so we have to create, you create a document that satisfies the requirements of the statute.
Okay.
And this is independently reported.
All right, ready to approve this extension of this emergency adoption. Is there a motion? Commissioner Cardozo, is there a second? Commissioner Ayers, those in favor, please say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And then I just have a
Sure.
question. The voting, so, is there a form already that we have for the affirmation of financial hardship? Those who need that, and I am looking at, section 937.9, fees, subdivision G. It's out that we.
Is the form on the website when an individual makes it?
There's a form that's available through the website to be downloaded and.
Oh, we did that, okay.
All right. So, tab G, number 7 on the agenda, extension of the emergency adoption of,
These are the adjudicatory
Procedure.
appeal process regulations. Yeah, it's part 941. It governs procedures. The proposed regulation conforms, among other things, conforms the prior regulations to the language and requirements. Background.
That's just one.
As well as some other conforming amendments, and we made it, it was a proposed change at the last commission meeting with respect to the definition of victim. And we added a definition of direct harm, so that's extended the rulemaking, which commenced some time ago. And now we need to extend again the emergency rulemaking so that when it's ripe for adoption at the June meeting, the emergency regulations will remain in effect.
That clear? All right, you're making the motion, Commissioner Edwards, or you're asking a question? Okay, sure, go ahead.
I thought what we had discussed, I think at the last meeting, that there'd be some criteria put in place for the executive director deciding not to elevate it.
Deciding not to elevate.
In paragraph 2, we're looking at G, right?
Yes.
Yep, G.
Yes.
In paragraph 2, any changes in the law, blah, blah, blah. Instead, the commission staff or commission can decide to elevate a preliminary review until investigation and goes into,
We discussed that that would be one of the things that the commission would be looking at going forward in its comprehensive view of all existing regulations. Not this one. This is intended to have a regulation in place governing until that process is complete, governing the investigative and enforcement process and certain disclosure procedures that the commission has, as well as certain appeals procedures that are available. We didn't have a proposal. The only change that was made last time was to elaborate the definition of victim to include a definition of direct harm.
What criteria do you plan to be using to decide?
The criteria we're planning to use are the criteria as they now exist in the statute, which call for quote the language rather than doing it off the top of my head. Information showing that there is specific and credible evidence that a violation of section 73, 73A, or 74 of the Public Officers Law, section 107 of the Civil Service Law, Article 1 of the legislative law by a person or entity subject to the jurisdiction of the commission, including members of the legislature and legislative employees or candidates for office, has occurred.
Can you say that in English or non?
Yeah, it's whether upon a preliminary investigation, which is, we're reading from the statute, whether there is specific and credible evidence that is on a preliminary review, we find that there is not per se circumstantial evidence, although it may be, but specific evidence indicating that an individual who's within our jurisdiction, public state officer, as defined in the Public Officers Law, or the Civil Service Law, or someone within the jurisdiction, our jurisdiction under the legislative law, has committed a violation of one of the statutes that we are responsible for enforcing. So a complaint comes in, we look at it, we take a preliminary review of it, and staff makes, after inquiring and conducting what investigation it can of a preliminary basis, either determines that there really is not substantiation of the allegation, or maybe there's evidence that indicates that there may be, to a formal investigation.
But if you're done.
And that's dictated by the statute. You know, what further elaboration I really think is something that the commission needs to look at in depth. In the meantime, we need a regulation that conforms procedurally to the requirements of ECRA, which change some of the procedures that we follow. Including this is a new procedure, this concept of elevation under old section 94. Commission would vote within 60 days after a 15-day letter issue, notarized complaint is received on whether to open an investigation. That procedure no longer exists. Now there's an elevation to a formal investigation that takes place, which can be initiated by staff or by the commission. So it's a procedural change that we need to reflect in our procedures in order to continue to do the work of the investigator.
All right.
I was just wondering, why would we be allowed to elevate a matter before we even got a response? What was the thought?
Legislatively, you know, again, that's one of the interesting questions. We don't have a legislative history because ACRA was part of a budget bill, and it calls for the 15-day letter after the elevation, or at the time the elevation takes place. That's when written notice shall be provided, setting forth to the extent the commission can, the nature of the allegations. That's that shift that took place between old 94 and new 94. And it may have been, I mean, I could come up with explanations for why it's set up that way. It gives staff and the commission the opportunity to weed out allegations that really have no substantiation or don't fall within the commission's jurisdiction.
To not pursue, but I'm wondering why you would pursue without getting a response. I understand that you could look at it and say, I don't even need a response from, you know, the respondent, but because we're going to close it, but I don't understand why we would advance a matter without first getting a response.
A response from whom?
From the respondent. From the person who is alleged to have engaged in whatever conduct.
I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous before the commission has looked at it, but you know, you may conclude differently, but at this point, we need that determination is called for by the statute before the 15-day letter issues. That's the statutory
I mean, I think
language.
the way that the statute is written now is that it's almost as if the 15-day letter, so basically the complaint comes in, staff looks at, does a preliminary review, staff realizes there's something here. And so that is when the elevation happens, that is when the 15-day letter goes out.
So the elevation is the 15-day letter, okay.
Yes.
So, and then they
And then
they have a,
And then they have a chance to respond, right, and then there's still more investigation happening. The 15-day letter doesn't start the hearing process, not even close. The 15-day letter basically is us staff saying, there's something here, we need to investigate this further. This is now a full-fledged investigation, it's not just a preliminary review. And then it gives the opportunity for the subject to respond, give their side of the story. We would still continue investigating, but now they are aware that they are the subject of an investigation.
All right, are we ready to vote on this extension? All those. Are you making the motion? All right. Is there a second? Commissioner Hare.
I just have one quick question. This is for both sets of,
the first one.
I don't think you, we did. Oh, I missed
We
that.
did.
Sorry.
Yeah, we voted on
Missed it. Sorry.
Right,
I know. It's like, I just had some water. What's going on?
exactly. It all runs together. All those in favor of this the extension of the emergency adoption, please say aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. The ayes have it. The motion's carried. All right, so in number 8, we're going to refer both of these to the legal committee for further review and discussion. Commissioner Ayers.
I'm sorry, this is a follow-up on our last conversation, just because I don't think it's appropriate for executive session. We mentioned the comprehensive review of the regulations, and I believe at our last meeting, I had asked what the plan was for that, or what the plan was for having a plan, and you indicated you would ask staff to prepare one, so I was just wondering how that's coming.
I'm assuming it hasn't been prepared.
It is in process. We talked about it at a couple of commission meetings.
And we gone on record and have it reflected up on the minutes that it will be presented at the June meeting, the July meeting. But what would work?
Michael has been
I
working.
think it's fair to say that we would like to present it at the June meeting. And so I think it's fair to say, yes, the plan is to present it at the June meeting.
To present your proposed revisions.
Oh, no. Those are kinds of things we need to consider. Is that correct?
Yeah, what are we
Yes.
doing?
What I'm working on is a review of the advisory opinions that currently, are in effect, and, what they mean, what they call for, what they require. And there'll be an opportunity to consider whether there are any gaps, whether there are any holes, whether there are any advisory opinions that, looking back, we think are erroneous or need revisiting in any way.
And their consistency with the statute.
Right.
The statutes as they currently. It's called for by ECHA.
So, yeah, no, that's good. My understanding of our responsibility is that the commission is supposed to do a comprehensive review of the advisory opinions and the regulatory scheme. And so my question was really not so much when are we going to get that review presented to us by staff, but what's the process and how are we, particularly on the commission, because how staff divides it up is obviously up to staff, but how are we on the commission going to figure out, is one committee going to take the lobbying stuff, or are we going to form a special, we have to get started on our role in this, and that's going to require a huge amount of work to bring the commissioners up to speed on literally the entire regulatory scheme before we can start making informed judgments about how it works. So my request was not so much for.
Well, so I think what we talked about was the legal committee looking at it. The other looking at it first, but I think it might be helpful if we just get a presentation maybe on those two big chunks. One is advisory opinions, the other two is sort of what you call the regulatory scheme. And then decide after we get this information, perhaps what we want to do. So maybe we have a special meeting where we just focus on those two things and then decide what the process will be for making any changes, you know, as opposed to trying to do it in the context of a regular meeting.
I think that one of the issues, though, is that part of this is going to be depending on the nature of, is it a public official requesting an advisory opinion, for example, versus a low-level person? So that goes back to what I call the delegation question.
Yeah.
How do we separate?
Well, that's what we will do. It seems to me in terms of a process, if we have a day where we're just dealing with this, then we'll decide where these things go. You know, is it delegation committee? Is it legal committee? Is it education committee?
So I guess I would suggest, since we're going to discuss committees at the end under new business, why don't we defer this discussion till then? Because I don't want to fall behind schedule, and it seems like there's a lot to think about here. So, and since it does overlap, I agree, it overlaps with what the delegation.
To hear your idea, did you have an idea you wanted to share about how to do this?
Well, I discussed what I was working on as far as a summary of all the advisory opinions. And the regulations will play in there too, because they're kind of interrelated. So it would be a review of the body of advisory opinions and regulations. There are 350 advisory opinions, so I'm not planning on touching on every single one, but thematically working through the advisory opinions and how they apply, and there'll be opportunity to examine them and decide if there's anything that needs to be done.
That's wonderful.
We're getting, and then we'll work from there.
Slightly different issue.
Well, that's how we get started.
Yes.
What do we do after we go to?
Well, yeah, but as Michael said, that process also incorporates a number of the regulations, part 932, outside activity, expense approvals and so on. So there's a series of the regulations or parts of the regulations that will be part of that.
No, I
It
think,
doesn't
I
obviate
think,
the
I
balance.
think Commissioner Ayers is saying, okay, good,
Understand.
all of that, but then what do we do once we get it? And I think that's what
That's
we
what
don't
you're
have a
saying.
process for. And I think we can get this download from Michael and company and then decide what we're going to do with it. But I think we need a special meeting to do that.
And I think we can.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be better to talk about this in the same context as the delegation. I mean, in my view, you all know this from my conversation about plain language. We're rewriting the regulatory scheme. We're not looking at it to see if it needs a few changes.
Right.
It's bad, it's incomprehensible.
Right.
It's immense hard work, and it could have only ever gotten this good thanks to so much hard work. But
Commissioner
it's,
Ayers, which is why I think we can't do it in the context of anything else. We
That
need
may
to
be a
do.
different view from.
Yeah, no, that's not, it's not. It's that we need a day where we talk about it all. So rather than saying, all right, we're going to decide whether this goes to the delegation committee when we talk about the delegation committee in executive session, we can allocate all aspects of what's reported to us to a particular committee as warranted, as opposed to doing it piecemeal. That's my only request.
That may be right. I want to clarify. I'm sorry. When I said it was bad, I didn't mean the regulatory scheme was bad. I mean the relationship that we have with our constituency and their ability to understand what we do needs work. I think the regulatory scheme is amazing in a lot of ways. And I apologize if that came off sounding differently.
I just have to make one comment that, through my years here, I've heard a lot of complaints from state employees and other stakeholders about various things having to do with Jacob, but no one has ever come to me and said, your regulations are so complicated, I can't understand them.
I'm saying that right now.
Right.
Well, I'm saying that, and I'll introduce you to other people who think that too.
That's fine.
I want to say, I think the plain language is necessary.
I agree, and I think the entire process needs its focus, as opposed to trying to do it initially in the context of something else.
We'll start with step one and then we'll figure
Figure
it
it out.
out.
All right. Commissioner Ayers? Are you in agreement?
Absolutely.
All right, so number 8, we're going to refer to the legal committee, both of those, the code of conduct and the meeting guidelines. What further? Okay, Mayor?
So that's tabled.
That's tabled, yes. And then now, so we want to have a discussion about committee process and procedures. And I think the big thing here is what actions does a committee take that then get referred to the full commission? Am I right, Commissioner? What's this at? So, for example, the special committee has a resolution that we will look at in executive session that is expected to come to the full commission for its support. The communications committee had a plan from communications staff that it reviewed, didn't necessarily vote on it, but it forwarded it to the full commission for consideration. Is that the appropriate process? And Commissioner Garland is saying that. That's what I think.
I thought we were going to hear from Commissioner Edwards.
Commissioner Edwards.
I'm sorry. I thought he was in that phrase.
Should be looking at this.
No.
I'm asking, are those the issues that you want considered at this point in the meeting? What happens in the committee that then gets referred to the full
Exactly, and what is the process? And it should be consistent, so like, for example, the whole issue of resolutions. Resolutions, in my mind, if you made a decision as a body to move those specifically to approve a policy of some sort. For this. And the committees, I try to understand, we don't have the authority to do anything.
And I think committees act on behalf of the board, so if the committee has the authority to draft a resolution that then gets presented to the board. The committee wouldn't have necessarily the authority to draft a resolution that just is an act on. Right?
So the resolutions are formulated as a recommendation to the full body to review, not to move on it.
The body could move on it if it wanted to. It's up to the body to choose what to do with what comes from the committee.
I think we also should address, should we take minutes? Some committees take minutes, some committees don't. And I think it was recommended by the person to the FOIL for us that we not take minutes. I personally like minutes, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on what that we should do, and if we do, it should be consistent across all committees.
Well,
And then
yeah,
Commissioner James.
Yeah, I'll speak to a couple of things. Some of the concern that Commissioner Edwards just expressed, I have the same concern, having just sat through as a non-committee member, seeing the subgroup talk about probably one of the most important issues confronting this commission, not that committee, but this commission. I think it goes to the nub of what a lot of people think was the source of the failure of Jacob. You know, I mean, it's who was doing what and who knew who was doing what. And this committee, which is even denominated as a special committee, I never heard what its charge was. I've never seen a draft charge, you know, what issue, or I get the sense issues the committee is dealing with. I hear a fellow commissioner to a memo he's written that talks of the complexity of the issues and the need for a legal opinion and all of this. And I still feel like a total bystander on that core issue confronting this commission. I've said.
And what do you identify as that core issue?
Well, what I'm suspecting, but the core issue, it seems to relate, does what, makes what decision? When does the staff have the authority to decide something, and when is something for the commission. The only thing I ever heard said about the creation of the committee was at the meeting before several of the commissioners were even on it, was there was reference to the discussion of the Hogan Lovells report relating to the book deal that came out, I believe, last June or July, where their number one recommendation was that the new body, when it's convened, look at the question of who gets to decide. I think it was limited to outside activity requests from statewide elections. That was because that was the nub of that issue. That was put out there after a thorough investigation, long before I think any of us were even nominated or clearly confirmed to be here. But it was out there from meeting two that this was something that needed to be looked at. And I don't know, I don't remember there ever being a meeting. I think there was a phone call, I recall, on a different topic, where somebody said, yeah, that should be looked at maybe by the legal committee, or maybe we need a special subcommittee of it. But that was a phone call. So I don't remember any discussion of that among the body. But I thought the issue, though, to the extent I knew there was this issue, was very narrow, because it was immediate and identified by that group. But then I was led to believe that by other comments I've heard, but I've never seen a single document, that telling me it's much more complicated. I'm hearing there's this legal question as to what the statute says and what council's opinion is, but I've never seen what I would have expected if, when I heard first time the committee met, they went into executive session, because I was watching that meeting, hoping to find out what it was the committee was doing. They went into executive session. I remember asking somebody, what'd you go into executive session for? And I was told, it's a legal issue. And in my mind, if there's this core legal issue that is so critical for this body to make a decision, I would expect we would identify the issue, question, member of the law school, question presented, what is the thing we need the answer to? And what is the answer? And that would involve an analysis, if it's statutory, what the statute says, application of the rules of statutory construction, any relevant case law, and probably some policy implications that could inform the judgment about the analysis. That's what I would expect if you've got a hard legal issue, particularly one that you now know some of the lawyer commissioners using their judgment might not agree with.
But isn't that where we're trying to get to? Isn't that what the commission, this special committee is going to work on?
Well, but the special committee has been in existence since November. And the legal question has been out there since November, but there's no memo. You've got this, it came up today. I still haven't heard a clear statement of the issue.
Well, I think there is a memo that has circulated in the special committee that has not circulated to all of the commissioners.
Everybody got was sent a copy when Michael first issued it.
A memo on what?
I don't know. An overview of the problem, of the issue.
Of the delegation committee.
I just don't know who, I don't know. And I think I sent it to Len. So I think he distributed it, but I'm not sure. I'm blaming him. I'm not sure.
So let's hear from
Story of my
Commissioner
life.
James and then Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner James?
I'll be brief. This is actually a little different subject. I think the committees, as being part of the commission, are entrusted with making recommendations and delving into the issues in detail so that they can come up with recommended policies and recommended decisions for the commission. But I don't believe that the committees unilaterally should be permitted to make a decision about commission business. They should always refer it back to the commission, unless in a particular instance, the commission has authorized that committee to take a particular action under certain conditions.
Seymour, we did in fact do that this morning when we reviewed a resolution that was to be brought before the full commission. All we did was in effect report it out of committee. So it was not, it's certainly a committee cannot act for the entire.
I think that Commissioner James's statement, I think we should formalize it because that's exactly what should happen. That the committees can, you know, they can consider most anything within the parameters of their mission, but nothing happens. Nothing happens officially until this commission votes. It's just impossible. I mean, they might try it, but it wouldn't have any impact or effect. Commissioner.
I just want to, I'm going back to what was said.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Whittingham. Commissioner Edwards is the commissioner.
Asking me to, I want to make, first I fully support what was just said with regard to defining the role of the committee with regard to making decisions, going back to the body. I'm fully agree with that. I think that in addition, we should also include in this description policies to invite all members of the board, to inform all members of the board when a committee meeting is being held. They should be invited to attend those committee meetings. So that they should get paid for it on a volunteer basis. And all the materials that is provided to the committee should be sent to the full board so they're prepared to participate. Then we should think about a policy on, well, how do non-committee members act in a committee meeting? Are they allowed to participate in the conversation? I would say yes. Are they allowed to vote? I would say no. But they should be very comfortable with chiming in and giving feedback to the conversation. With regard to minutes, I think we should agree one way or the other. The executive committee maintains minutes. I see the value of not keeping them as was recommended. Well, the question is, should we keep minutes? And if we do, it should be consistent across the board. I was informed that we wouldn't keep minutes. But then today, when we had a discussion, we talked about let the minutes reflect. So I just think that whatever we decide, it should be clarified and documented in a description in terms of how we.
I agree, and I think committees need to record their actions.
But not
at a minimum. I'm agnostic on whether or not committees should keep formal minutes, but I do think committees need to record their actions, report them.
What is the difference between recording and minutes?
Michael.
I understand my concern, and I went back and looked, I was the only one who voted against other people being able to come to the meeting whenever we voted the first time. But the concern I have is we've got to be sure that the committee, other people may be there and offering comments, but the committee's got to be the group that gets a little bit more expertise, if I can use that, spends time. Because otherwise, we're having a mini commission meeting at every committee, every controversial subject of a committee meeting, and it's going to slow us down. But the theory behind a committee meeting is that they're going to study it and become experts and will make a recommendation. And if you have a mini commission meeting for every committee meeting, there's a danger that we're not going to get anything done. It was highlighted, we had a meeting this morning, it was going to take 15 minutes. I don't mean at all to denigrate what the visitors brought to the meeting, but it became a much longer debate. So that
I don't believe we spoke.
I think we did. But I think the point is, we've got to be sure we're efficient. We have so much to do as a commission. We have so much action we have to take as a commission. We have to ask ourselves, how are we going to be effective? And if we take every major controversial issue, and I haven't heard one that's not controversial, that everybody can come in and talk about, we're in danger of not getting anything done.
And we should talk about it at the commission.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Whittingham, and then Commissioner Harris, but did you want to respond to?
I'm not proposing, what I'm proposing is to define what the participation should be. There's nothing wrong, I think, with the commission's participating and becoming equally informed. I don't think that, and I think that having conversation and offering input is of value to all. Doesn't slow up the process. But I don't think there should be a say that non-members should have the final word.
I want to talk about the discussion.
But I don't necessarily agree with this whole notion that the fewer the better.
Commissioner Whittingham and Commissioner Ayers, and then Vice Chair Austin.
Going back to some of the things that we've been talking about, and I want to address specifically our logo. We had a discussion that.
No. We're just talking about procedure here. We have the logo in committee. We've already referred that.
No. I believe I raised an issue, and when the director said something, I specifically said a part of the procedure, and I'll leave it for new business as well, which I believe is a part of the procedure for the committee.
Let's talk about general procedure. Let's not talk about the specific logo issue. I mean, we're talking about general procedures for committees, what is going to be our operating.
And I'm referencing, okay, let me do it generally, but I have to highlight something that happened because everything that is being discussed here is as a result of something specific. So it was specifically the guidance committee this morning, right? It was specifically another committee. Okay, so let me say one thing. We should not, as a commission, be accepting 3- and 4-person majority votes to speak for the entire commission. And that has happened. I'll leave it until it happened on the logo. It happened on the logo. And I asked that question specifically and I got a response and it happened in other instances. And so we did not have a committee vote on such a critical issue, and the minutes can reflect it. It was discussed last month. It wasn't voted on. And then a 3-person, as the director stated, may have gotten 5 response. There were 3 people that says yay, and we have it every single place. On all of this, we have changed everything with 3 persons saying yes. We should not do that. And that's a general policy. Thank you.
I agree that we should. And thank you for the contribution. Commissioner Austin. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You had your hand first.
No, thanks. So, I mean, number one, I think we should have a resolution on committee procedure because I'm going to forget half of what we all agree on today, even if it's in the minutes. And the minutes are great, but I think there's clearly enough recurring issues here that we should have a conversation. I think at some point we've already agreed that, and the committee has input and output, right? Like I think Commissioner Groenewegen was saying, like what's the question presented for the committee? I feel very unclear about whether it's a delegation committee or a committee on guidance procedures, and I'm on that committee. And I think that the answer to that is to have the full commission. I think we've already decided this, but it could be misremembering. I think we should have the full commission vote on the questions presented for each committee or the deliverable that each committee is going to produce, because otherwise there's a risk that multiple committees will assign themselves the same issue or have overlap. And so because to me, I mean, agreeing with what everybody said, the committee's job, but I think disagreeing to some extent with Commissioner Cardozo, I think part of the role of a committee is to make sure that when members of the commission feel that they need to have a more in-depth conversation about an issue before they can in good conscience vote for it, the committees are their chance to do that without taking up these meetings where we have a to-do list that's absolutely mandatory, that we have to get through. And so to me, it's a good thing if the committee shares with everybody, hey, we're going to be talking about X issue. And even if every single member of the commission goes to that committee meeting, none of us gets to say, you should defer to me. None of us on the commission gets to say, you should defer to me or my work. It's a judgment we all have to make about what we need to know and what we need to see addressed before we can vote to support something. And to me, committees are a wonderful way to accomplish that because time is so short. But so it may be that in some people's eyes, a certain issue should only take a certain amount of time to vote and approve. But if another commission member doesn't think they can vote on it in that amount of time, I mean, we have to make a decision collectively, but respecting everybody's need to engage at the level that they judge appropriate. And so to me, the question about input, it's crucial that we all vote on the charge, that if there's a memo that defines the scope of what a committee is going to try to answer, that the full commission see that everybody be invited and given the opportunity to include, even if that means in a painfully long committee meeting. It's better that than conversations in the hotel lobby later. That's the alternative. It's not that people will actually get cut out of the conversation. And then at the end of it, the committee's job is to present a recommendation on whatever question, to answer whatever question. Here's our proposal. And then hopefully these meetings will get pretty short.
That's my friend.
That's the idea. And those of us who don't care about the logo can just leave it to y'all.
Like that's what happened. All right, bottom line is that what is being suggested to some extent, in effect, is a committee of the whole on everything. And we're not going to be able to vote.
The committee would be interested on everything.
We're authorizing certain people who have been assigned to a committee to take up what is the commission has asked them to take up, reports, and the commission will make the decision, not just the committee. In fact, most committees are less than 5, so that it's impossible to have a number of required votes to proceed. But if we're all going to dive into everybody's committee, and I mean, God help us.
The thing is,
You're now creating
I would agree with Commissioner Edwards that, because I don't think we can tell members of the commission they can't go to a committee. I just don't, as a fundamental operative principle, right? I think you had some basics that could go into a motion. I think the first of those is that we will have, that all commissioners will be invited to committee meetings, that all materials will be presented, that all commissioners are allowed to speak, only commissioners of that committee are allowed to vote. That all actions taken by the committee get reported back to the full commission for consideration by the full commission.
answer the question on that.
And that will record all actions taken at every committee meeting.
So, and if a commissioner is watching the committee meeting virtually, will they still have an opportunity to participate?
I think so, actually, as long as the law doesn't.
Well, I don't want to give a definitive opinion, but there may be an open meetings law issue with respect to participation that doesn't comply with 103.
Right. If a commissioner who doesn't have a vote on that committee wants to participate virtually, does it violate the open?
I think strictly speaking, but I don't want to give a definitive opinion. We look at that more closely. You can watch as a member of the public. Remember, we're live streaming.
Yeah, because I was watching it because I was late, so I just tuned in remotely until I got to the meeting. Yeah.
Strictly speaking, participation needs to comply either with being present at a location. The public can also be present. Be within the exemption permitted by 103-A, provided there's a quorum.
So does someone want to draft? We'll pick it up at when we reconvene in the open meeting. Does someone want to draft a motion that lays out those 6 or so things that we just mentioned?
I can have lunch. I can draft a motion.
Thank you. All right. Well, it's up to your fellow commissioners as to whether you want to get lunch or to be able to draft that motion. So where are we? So, yes.
Is it appropriate when we're looking at guidelines for meetings? Should this document also address guidelines for public hearings?
No, not now. I mean, eventually we can get there. We should address it, but
I just ask, clearly the consensus is that, although I don't agree with it, that everyone should be able to come to the commission meeting. But I assume this actually, committee meeting, the actual scheduling of the committee meeting, which is virtually very difficult today
Will
because
be
the open
done
meeting
by
law.
committee.
That's got to, the priority's got to be the committee.
Right, so then, yeah, if whoever can join can, but they shouldn't be part of schedule.
You're not.
I don't think so. That's just.
We'll note that in.
Yeah.
All right, and
Yes.
we, motion to, well, recess, motion to adjourn to the executive session, and we'll take a break and get lunch before we go to the executive session. So let me just read the motion as it should be. Motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law 105 and Executive Law 9, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending litigation, investigative benefits. Matter that is. Motion.
Yes, there's.
Second, Carvalho, Vice Chair. Those in favor? Opposed? All right, we are adjourned to executive session.
Marlena?
All right, entering into executive session in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, New York, you're live.
Thank you. We are now reconvening the public session of this meeting of, where are we, May 23rd? We'll have a readout, and then we have one action item we'll pick up.
Thank you. In executive session, the commission discussed matters related to litigation and legal advice. The commission considered several requests for informal guidance pursuant to Executive Law, Section 94(7) and Part 932, and rejected one such request. The commission addressed several investigative matters, closed 7 matters, and discussed several other investigative matters.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner Caraballo.
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider our logo.
Second. I understood we're going to have a motion to refer this to the communications committee. So you want 2 motions? All right, it is late. All right, so there's a motion for the reconsideration of the logo. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no? No. I'm opposing. Okay.
As opposed to going to committee.
Yes, I'm opposed to referring it, and then I'll be voting no on the next motion too.
So it's 2 motions.
So it's 2 motions, right? Right. So the motion passes, I'm assuming 8-2. Right? There's, now,
We know what Mr. James and Commissioner Carney voted.
I'm not in favor of it. 6-3 then? Did you count me in the nays?
okay,
I voted aye.
7-3. And Seymour, you're not in favor either, did you say?
No, I voted aye.
Aye,
I
okay,
voted in favor.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not in favor
Okay.
of reconsidering the logo. I actually think the logo is something I'm very happy to bring to staff on, and I don't feel the need for the commission discussion
So
that
we're,
we've had.
so 6-4.
No, I'll join that.
To reconsider 6-5 now, but now it fails. That's it needs 6, so the motion to reconsider fails. All right, motion to adjourn?
If I may,
Discussion.
before we adjourn, the legal committee meeting, obviously, which was scheduled for 3, is a little bit late. I will announce a new meeting time very shortly.
Commissioner Whittingham has asked that there be a discussion.
All right. So the previous motion that just failed,
That was the motion, yes.
so you want to, what do you want to do? You want to move that we have discussion about the motion?
So yes, move to have discussion. So it's
You want-
our table, and table it again, we had a vote.
I'm gonna rule all of that out of order. That motion failed and,
That's why I was
Sure.
speaking out loud.
okay,
To say,
thank
are
you.
we doing this or that? Because
So the motion failed. I don't know what other motion could be made. You can make the same one.
consider it. I think you can be.
Motion to reconsider. All right, would you
I
like to
think
make
that's
that
a
motion?
point of order. I would like to make a motion to reconsider all
Is there,
and to table it until the next time.
reconsider? No, I'm gonna rule that out of order.
I'll make first to reconsider it.
Need a second.
Thank
Not
you.
debatable.
Second.
All right, so a motion to reconsider the motion to reconsider the logo. All those, is there any discussion?
Yes.
No, it's not debatable.
A motion to reconsider is not
Reconsider.
All right, I'll take the judges, the vice chair's word for that. All right, all those in favor of the motion to reconsider the logo, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. The motion fails. Anything else? One abstention. So we had 2 ayes. I would assume
I was
that's
an aye. Only because I'd like
Three-
to explain why I voted no.
3 ayes, 6 noes, and 1 abstention for a total of 10.
You were saying
I was
first?
an aye.
I wasn't a aye.
You and I,
Yes, I was an aye.
Was an aye.
then it still fails.
Yeah.
5-5, the motion.
Aye.
All right, motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those no, the ayes have it, motion's carried. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.